Good evening. Let's call the meeting to order. Can I get the roll, please?
Councilmember Evans.
Present.
Councilmember Rubstello. Present. Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Present.
Mayor Millman.
Present.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Present.
Councilmember Arndt.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
All present. Can we stand for the flag salute, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I move to accept the agenda in order and content.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. No special presentations. Public comments. We have a packed house tonight. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to call everybody up one at a time. You'll have 3 minutes. I'm going to try to keep that pretty concise because we have such a large crowd. And we have a lot of business items tonight. We're going to have a long meeting, so please stick to the 3 minutes if possible. Thank you. First up is, well, I'd like to point out that I have some public comments that was received by council in writing. So those will all be able to be read by all council members, and we'll start with the public comments. First up is Alex Campbell. Please state your name and whether you live in the city limits, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Okay, that is on. Alex Campbell, I live in the city limits. Good to see you again. I think everybody here is very fond of our valley. It's beautiful. Its agrarian nature is what drives a lot of our economy and helps us also have a healthy environment. We also know that NERTS, aka the dump, and I know it's a transfer station, I'll call it the dump because that's what the signs that somebody put up said, will be terrible for such land, both in and out of the city. It'll destroy it'll leach, there will be traffic, there will be economic impacts. The county, of course, will tell us that the environmental impacts can be mitigated. They'll tell us that the traffic impacts can be mitigated. They can't do anything about the economic. So let me remind everyone that we had a really excellent presentation last week, and it's available online. Everyone should take a look at it from some consultants on the economic and transportation impacts. And that's really our key to stopping NERTS. That's what we need to all focus on as you go into your executive session tonight and discuss the Friends of the Sammamish Valley amicus brief. Though it's certainly a good argument, I have to point out that this particular group has twice burned multiple members of the county council. And so by signing on, we actually are losing friends in the county right when we need them to be speaking up and pointing out our economic impact is not mitigatable. And that's all, remember, the decision for NERTS is in early 2024. So we sign on now, the lawsuit goes forward, they will just have this bad taste in their mouth. So I do think, keep that in mind tonight as you go in. I have a little time left, so let me just speak to another thing. There was a great online petition for a rainbow crosswalk. I was glad to sign up. I think I was number 100 of the 300 plus on there, something around there. And I did make a comment. Of course, it scrolls off after a while, so I'll just add this. We should absolutely put a rainbow crosswalk in Woodinville. I think we should actually have more, but we should do more to bring inclusion and proof that we want everyone here. And I think the key place to put this is the center of our pedestrian downtown, high pedestrian foot traffic, low vehicle traffic, so it's better for maintenance. That's the middle of Wooden Creek. I think right between Bricks and the wine bar and Zeke's Pizza. Beautiful spot, lots of people there, lots of good photo ops. It'd be a great spot. With that in mind, thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Next, Shenquan Liang.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Shenquan Liang, and I live within the city limits. Good evening, the council and all of the guests. Thank you all for coming. I've never seen so many people at the City Hall before. I applaud the active participation and commitment of all the people who actually invest in the city affairs. I think this is a great engagement. Will strengthen our democracy and ensures that we make decisions in the best interest of our community. Thank you guys for coming. I've never seen so many people. I have to make that plug. So as I look at the City Council's agenda today, there is particularly about this executive session agenda. I have some concerns about the about even having the council contemplating, having participated in this lawsuit against King County, over some kind of unincorporated agricultural land, right? So I think there's a couple of issues I would raise. I think one thing is historically, I think we have seen that there was a previous lawsuit just a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I think involving another property, I think outside the city limits. There was cost to the city to the tune of $700,000. That's roughly, in terms of households, I think the cost was $127 for each of the housing in Woodinville. It didn't really yield any tangible benefits to the city, right? That's a historical fact. And also, in terms of resource allocation, I mean, how could, say if the city does, makes a decision to actually participate in this lawsuit in any way, I mean, the reasonable question to ask is, could this funding, the resources be better invested to enhance other places in the city, like such as infrastructure or supporting local businesses or boost those community programs through some grants? I think those things will yield more meaningful and immediate and also enduring benefits. That's in my opinion, of course. Also, like Alex pointed out earlier, filing a lawsuit on the risk of raising some unnecessary hostility with the county, potentially triggering an unfavorable decision regarding the location of the nurse facility, which is the dump site that everybody in Woodinville does not like. Pretty much nobody likes that idea in Woodinville. Right? So this is a matter of significant local interest. And I think with all these issues, I urge the council to consider those concerns and before actually making a decision one or the other on embarking this path that could have lasting impacts on city's financials and resources. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Steve Yabroff.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. I'm Steve Yabroff. I live in the city of Woodinville and the city limits. In looking over the agenda for tonight, I was struck by 2 agenda items. First one was agenda item number 11, having to do with Zipley. I was surprised that City Council or City has let Zipley's fines accumulate over 3 years to now $60,000. I was disappointed to see the council offer to waive $30,000 of that in order to, quote, mitigate customer backlash of 31 customers to cover approximately $17,000 for a 6-month extension of service, an offer that Zipley has not responded to as of the date of the online report. Further compounding my disappointment is that Zipley is now asking for a cheaper approach to fiber installation and for Woodinville to waive all their fees for a breach of contract. Maybe it's time for the city to stand up for the citizens rather than cave into this company. The second item, number 12, purchase of a new Ford Lightning pickup. While I applaud the idea of moving to electric vehicles, it seems premature to proceed with this purchase before the necessary fast charging system is available for an extended period of time. Using a, quote, trickle charger to charge this EV will likely mean that it will be more on a charger at least 1 day for every day it's in service. Since we need a truck now, it would seem smart choice to buy a conventional or hybrid truck and then buy the electric vehicle truck when we actually have the needed charging system. Just seems like prudent management, doesn't it? Thank you for hearing my concerns and for your service to Woodinville. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Heidi Schabli.
Good evening. My name is Heidi Schabel. I am a queer resident of Cottage Lake, Woodinville, and I have lived and worked in the surrounding community since I was 9 years old. I helped start a group called Woodinville Social Justice Connection in 2016, just after the Orlando massacre. which killed 49 people and injured 53 more at a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida. This event prompted community members to start speaking out about their experiences with homophobia, transphobia, racism, xenophobia, and ableism right here in Woodinville. We identified a need to stay together and start working together to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion here in Woodinville. One of the ways to improve public safety and inclusion is through visual representation. Research suggests that LGBTQIA+ people in areas with less visual representation in the visuals that surround them report experiencing more discrimination and bias. I know myself and other LGBTQIA+ members often take into consideration where to live, eat, and do business based on which areas have made intentional efforts around inclusion and diversity. Today, we'd like to start a conversation with the council about how to install a rainbow crosswalk in Woodinville by speaking to how this process has worked in surrounding communities and by demonstrating community support that we've gathered for this art installation in Woodinville. Axton will be speaking after me and will go into more detail about how this process has worked in neighboring cities. We hope this potential crosswalk will serve as a permanent symbol of the town's commitment to diversity and inclusion while demonstrating solidarity with members of the LGBTQIA+ communities. We hope that this landmark will represent how far we've come together as a community and our ongoing pledge to making all feel welcome. For those of you that are here today to demonstrate support, please stand so the council can see all of the people here to show your support, even if you do not plan to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Axton Burton?
Hello, Council and Mayor. My name is Axton Burton. I'm a voting Redmond local who frequents Woodinville not only to see and support my clients through my 8-year-old independent business, but as a patron of the many parks, businesses, and favorite restaurants where I visit with my friends, colleagues, and for my business for the nonprofit I run, Pride Across the Bridge. I, as those who are here in person, online, have signed the electronic and paper petitions that are calling to the City of Woodinville leadership to put action behind its stated values of Pride proclamations. We ask that you take steps to install a permanent asphalt art installation, a rainbow crosswalk. This piece of visibility is needed now more than ever for our diversifying community of residents, visitors, and patrons who spend their time looking to find safe spaces to bring their family and friends. I've had the honor of helping with the creation of Woodinville Pride this year and had a wonderful time creating Woodinville Pride last year and connecting with residents, residents at your community-inspired and created event over the last 2 years. Hearing excited community members who saw the petition we were talking about, talking with strangers about where they would like to see this installation right in front of me had a contagious excitement. As Heidi has shared, there is an absolute need for this art installation in the city of Woodinville. Visibility is an integral step for any city to show where its values lie, and with the still increasing mass number of inhumane laws, invalidating, dehumanizing, and criminalizing those in the queer community and their families, showing the people that you serve that you see and value all of your residents should be a very high priority. In our short time collecting signatures at Woodinville Pride and online, we've got more than 525 signatures from residents and patrons of Woodinville who have shared their vision for our community, all of which have been sent to each of you and the mayor and city council members. I've shared an email with all of you that there would be a growing number of cities in Eastside that have created or are already breaking ground on their own installations of these needed art pieces. Bellevue has multiple rainbow crosswalks, both in the city and their Bellevue College campus. Kirkland's installation was publicly celebrated in June, and Redmond's is on track to be installed mid to late August. A bridge away, we've got Seattle's 11 crosswalks. Kenmore's unique and inspiring steps are currently in development, and Yakima's 6 rainbow crosswalks, as well as Spokane, who is currently working on the location for theirs. There are numerous amount of ways that a city can go about the process for installing a rainbow crosswalk, and I challenge the city of Woodinville leaders to approve this art installation, and not only that, but turn to community members to not only lead on this piece of the location, but also its design. It's important that this is led by the community and approved by the city, so that way it follows the community's vision. I've personally put together and sent all of you a very detailed, hyperlinked, and bullet-pointed list of cities and their policies, their guidelines, procedures, attached pictures of their crosswalks, and even example postcards that each of them have sent to residents when they need to close a road to paint. The main thing that I've learned while collecting this data is that each city can choose just how easy or difficult this process can be. From pointing to a city's Arts and Culture Commission, to working with a group that's already connected with the queer community, to having a 4-page application, which is 8 pages less than your city's event application. This group of people gets to decide what impact Woodinville will have on its vulnerable residents. Visitors, students, workers, during one of the most difficult times being led by Supreme Court, ignorant, hateful, inactive cities and states across the country. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Margaret Casellas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Margaret Kitselis. I am the Secretary of Pride Across the Bridge with Axton Burton. I am not a Woodinville resident, although I do love to stimulate your wine economy. So you can thank me for that. No, I'm just kidding. But at the heart, besides the fact that I love how beautiful and welcoming Woodinville is, I love to take my clients there. I work with handicapped children, and having an inclusive environment is so vital. And of course, my other passion, besides working with handicapped children, is supporting all children, and children that are part of the LGBT community are incredibly vulnerable. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we've seen an increase in teen suicide and depression, and having a public art installation like this can be so deeply meaningful. And the best part is that when you have acceptance for the LGBT community, they have noticed that there's an overall drop in teen suicide. That when you have an inclusive, welcoming environment, it raises the mental health of everyone around. And I love that Woodinville comes together to celebrate, the joyous things in life, the beautiful things in life. And I know that this is something that you could do that will be so incredibly meaningful and so incredibly impactful. And I just wanted to speak to you tonight and thank you for your service to Woodinville. And I can't wait to come back again. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Bounty Sanders.
That is a hard one to follow. Good evening, Council. I'm Susan Bounty Sanders, a resident of Woodinville. I'm here tonight to repeat the request for an amicus memorandum in support of discretionary review of King County versus Friends of Sammamish Valley and FutureWise. As I described at your last meeting, there are multiple impacts to Woodinville and many other cities at issue in this case. The current situation allows sprawl, converting the ambience of farmland to just another commercialized valley like Kent or Puyallup, which, if allowed, destroys the ambience of the valley, which is the foundation of Woodinville's wine tourism. As the situation stands, it would allow more Woodinville businesses to move from Woodinville to cheaper rural land close by, causing vacancies inside the city limits. As it stands now, the sprawl incentivized by the published opinion makes it harder for Woodinville to predict its growth and plan and invest for it inside the city limits. And as the case stands right now, the sprawling pattern of growth would make it less likely that Woodinville would get public transit. Regarding the relationship between my request tonight and NERTS, there is complete agreement between the city's position on NERTS and Friends of Sammamish Valley's positions on NERTS and agricultural land. They fit together. If you allow NERTS and allow the type of outflow plumes that Mr. Campbell described and so on, that spoils farmland. They are not compatible with each other. Friends of Sammamish Valley submitted comments objecting to the Woodinville NERTS site on the basis of its proximity to agricultural land and the Sammamish River and its salmon migrations. While I have time, I just want to correct a couple of the incorrect statements that have been made before. King County Council members want the Supreme Court to take this case. They have said so repeatedly. Woodinville would be doing exactly what multiple King County Council members have asked for. So again, the request is for an amicus memorandum to the Washington Supreme Court supporting discretionary review of King County versus Friends of Sammamish Valley and FutureWise. This memorandum would have to be preceded by a motion to file the memorandum, and the memorandum itself is due by September 11th. Thank you all.
Thank you. Leah Wang?
Good evening, Council and everyone. I'm Leah. I moved to Woodinville 2 years ago. Now I have a question brought out, but I'm not native speaking. So I will ask Mayor to help me to pronounce. Thank you.
So I'm Mel Liu. I'm also a resident. I'm her husband. This is the first time doing anything like this, and I'm woefully unprepared. She just told me to do this. So I'll make it quick. So over the past few years, short-term rentals have been on the rise in all the communities around here, and they're great for offering visitors a convenient and usually reasonable way of visiting various places, and they bring us tourist dollars and things like that. They also have certain challenges, though, and many of our neighboring cities have recognized these issues and enacted relevant laws and regulations to lost my place. With the aim of preserving the tranquility and harmony of the neighborhoods. So I strongly believe that Woodinville should also consider implementing appropriate laws and regulations, and these ordinances could help with noise and disturbance. Some short-term rentals could create disturbance at inappropriate hours, large parties, affecting the life of the residential neighborhood. There's safety concerns, again, large parties, traffic congestion due to parking, and frankly, taxation issues, because these are businesses, but people don't necessarily even know how to go about reporting their income on these things correctly. As I said, numerous other cities have successfully tackled these issues by enacting relevant laws that had a positive impact on their community as well as their short-term rental communities. So I believe that implementing similar regulations in Woodinville would benefit our community's development and well-being. So therefore, I earnestly request your support and propose for the enactment of suitable legislation, ordinance, whatever the right term is, in Woodinville. Thank you.
Thank you. James Webster?
Hello, my name is, Hello, my name is James Webster. I am a local in Redmond, not from Woodinville. I'm Axton's partner and the vice chair of Pride Across the Bridge. I'm here just to make public comment in support of the Rainbow Crosswalk. And I'm not going to say anything that you probably haven't heard, but I just wanted to tell you from my own perspective. The first time I ever came to Woodinville, I believe I was 13 years old. I rode my bike on the Burt Gilman Trail and came to the Gateway Park and was blown away by the beauty of Woodinville. My dad, my sister, and I, we rode around and fell deeply in love with Woodinville and have come back many times since. The Rainbow Crosswalk is a sign of visibility that the impacts of which you may never fully see. Many people are unable to express in an open way how much these things mean to them. My partner put up rainbow ribbon fences, 2 in Redmond and 1 in Duval, and we have received comments and compliments from people all around the east side, letting us know how much the visibility has meant to them, to be seen and to feel safe. Even if you don't feel in danger, you might approach your own life with hesitancy, but to be embraced in such a beautiful place draws people out, not just to the city itself, but to themselves. I urge the council, I urge the mayor and all parties concerned to put up a rainbow ribbon crosswalk and to support the LGBTQIA+ community who so desperately and so dearly want to love themselves, love each other, and love you. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Harris.
Hello, my name is Gary Harris. I'm a resident of Woodinville. Some of you may remember me as the past mayor. I'm also involved in CNW. I am not here speaking on behalf of CNW. They have not given me that authority to do that. I'm speaking only as myself. I have two things to discuss. One is a disappointment, and one is something that I'm angry about. No surprise there. First, my disappointment. Wood Trails, I have read that we have received the park impact fees. What I read, I think, said in February that we received over $1 million in park impact fees. Don't quote me on the exact time and number. And then further, in this, what I was reading, it said that there would be some scoping and feasibility done, and the construction would start in the summer of 2024. That is totally unacceptable. Park impact fees are for parks like Wood Trails. If you recall, I was here maybe a year ago or less and reminded the current city council that Wood Trails was on the agenda in 2020 and again in 2021. It was on the CIP budget. I held up the CIP and showed you the pages where this was discussed as an agenda item. And so now we're saying, well, gosh, we can't do anything until 2024. So please reconsider that and spend that money for what it's for. I did see that a sign was made and Dave Henry Trail, but no work has actually been done. So the fact that a picture is in the paper and a sign is posted does not constitute making a trail. My other issue is regarding agenda item 7, which I'm not going to get to, mixed-use rezone. And I am angry about the sale of the Union 76 station for greater than $1 million over assessed value. The city, if you recall, tried to buy that station. We couldn't because it was priced too high. And now we had somebody come along and spend more than $1 million above assessed. And I want to know what this person is getting in return. If you look at what he owns in the area, I think that is very telling. Thank you.
Motion?
Sorry, got put in by the public comments. Thank you, everyone, for visiting today. I'd like to accept the calendar as written.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. First business item is number 7, GB Mixed Use Affordable Housing Analysis. Mr. Grumbaugh.
All right, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Let me go ahead and bring up, my presentation here. All right, as noted, this agenda item is the GB mixed-use affordable housing analysis that we wanted to present to you tonight. Just a quick outline of the presentation. I just have a few slides here, but just go over real quick. So we'll start out by talking a little bit about the background as to why we are talking about the GB mixed-use zone. Then I want to talk a little bit about the GB rezoning analysis. Then we're going to get into the traffic analysis and the findings from that. And we have Jeff Pearson with Fears and Peers here, our traffic consultant, is going to help present on that piece of it. And then the last part is we'll have a discussion and next steps. And one of the things I want to ask you to kind of keep in your thoughts as we go through these slides and presentation, and it's the question that's asked in the staff report that is in your packet, and that's answering this question about whether we should continue considering modifying zoning by developing this new mixed-use zone with requirements for affordable housing. So that's the main thing as we go through this. That's kind of the main theme going through this presentation and what we're hoping the discussion will focus on for tonight. So a little bit about background. This got started back when we were working on the economic development plan and the adoption of that back in September of 2022. You may recall that included some policy language in there about taking a look at adding residential to the general business zone as one of the things towards economic development. One of the ideas was maybe looking at how we might make something more happen along in the GB area, which is all next to the 522. And so one of the things that was also included in there was that we would take a little bit more look at this about the affordable housing aspects of this when we did our housing action plan, which at the time we had kicked off and were in the midst of working on developing. So we completed that work, and then in May of 2023, the council adopted the housing action plan, and it included the strategy, as we took a look at it, about to use the proposed GB mixed-use zone area to promote affordable housing. And that kind of identified this as one of maybe the best opportunities outside of once the CBD zone is kind of fully built out. The GB area represents one of the areas where we have a lot of vacant land that might offer an opportunity to significantly have an effect on affordable housing here, or trying to produce affordable housing in the city. So as part of that, then, we also in that same month at the council meeting, we brought, you may recall, 3 options for you to take a look at as far as the boundaries. And so the picture up here in the slide here, which is also in your staff report, this was the selection of the council, was for us to take a look further at this as the boundaries of it. So diving a little bit now into the rezoning analysis, the memo that's included in your packet. One of the things I want to note, you'll see that this includes part of includes the council's selection of the proposed mixed-use area, but we've also included adding the central business district area that's kind of like currently divides it. And so what this ends up adding up to, so this whole area you see highlighted here is what we analyzed for affordable housing and then also for traffic. So the area composes of just slightly under 54.5 acres is the total size of it. That includes about 11.5 acres of Little Bear Creek stream buffer. And just for a note on this, the Little Bear Creek is one of our shorelines of statewide significance. So that stream buffer is actually got a different shoreline designation. So development within that area is very much restricted, both because of the stream and also because of the shoreline regulations that apply to it as well. But it's important, and so it's important to note that as we look at the analysis about what land we actually have to work with, it's not necessarily the full 54.5 acres. Also in here was identified about 4.69 acres of right-of-way that currently exists in there. And I already mentioned about the central business zone piece being added into it. And then if you I think most of you probably are familiar with the area, but would just again note that the area currently consists of a mix of retail, offices, a lot of warehouses, construction and auto-oriented businesses, and then also there is a lot of vacant property in that area as well. So diving a little bit more into it, as we were putting this analysis together, we went back and took a little bit of some of the methodologies for analyzing potential development by looking at our billable lands analysis, the land capacity analysis that was done for King County that set our growth target numbers for both jobs and housing. So a couple of things out of that we took a look at. One, we identified redevelopable properties first, and that takes a look at vacant lands plus low improvement to land value ratios. Generally, that's kind of used as that low improvement to land value is used as a identifier of a property that may be primed for redevelopment because of the basically redevelopment that could be cost effective for it. We also took a look at market factors, which assumes economic and the likely chance for redevelopment by 2044. So one of these looks like at specific objective numbers, and then the other one is just kind of looking at what we're projecting out for market things that if somebody, even though the zoning may say you can do this, what's the likelihood of it that it could possibly redevelop? And again, this was stuff that we had developed out of our land capacity report when we were putting together our growth target numbers with King County. So those methodologies were developed actually originally by King County. Then on adding to this, then we took a look at assumptions of what we might anticipate for development in here. And so in looking at this, we looked at what's been the more recent history in the central business district zoning. And so a lot of the recent projects, including the Mulvax project, the average on these is around 60 dwelling units per acre. So that's an assumption we use as far as number of dwelling units. Typically, even though we allow a lot more in commercial floor area ratio, we generally see with redevelopment on these properties that it's about this 0.30 typically is what ends up getting built. And then this last one, this 300 square feet per job, this is also from our billable lands report. This is based on methodology and analysis that King County has used, that they've done across King County as a whole to come up with these numbers. So we put these all together and then use these to help generate our analysis as to what potentially we could see in terms of housing and potentially we could see in terms of jobs. So again, this is in your report, and this is one of the diagrams from in there that shows if we followed like current patterns. So we looked at it actually a couple things. So we looked at the possibility of what housing and job production would be with full build out using the gross area of the site. And we also looked at it taking out the shoreline buffer area, the stream buffer along in there. And one of the reasons why we looked at both of these is because a lot of the way our codes currently work and the way you can apply density and things like that is we usually use the gross area of the property. But in practice, when you start taking things like height and setback and other limitations like that, you generally rarely ever can build out fully to that. But when we get to, if we do move forward with this and later on next year, when we start looking at development regulations, we'll be coming back to this and we'll talk about things like height and stuff like that. And note that these were things that we look at in terms of what we want to look at for outcomes and jobs in terms of affordable housing. So we also then, based on the house production out of this, did an assumption between 10 and 20% for affordability. And so you can see the range on that where we would anticipate is around this 127 to about 346, because where we would be if we followed current development patterns is the full build out you see there with excluding the stream buffer. So the 1735 and the 658 jobs would be kind of what we would expect if we kind of follow current development patterns. And so that's going to produce in this range. But then again, as mentioned, if we decide that we want to look at some development incentives, you could potentially get up to maybe 416 affordable units if we built at the higher or allowed for at the higher housing development range. And then, so before I go into this slide, any questions on the housing piece?
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, I see a lot here, but what I don't see is where's the target? Where do we need to be population-wise and job-wise, and where are we right now, and how far out of line are we with all the plans that we have?
Yeah, so all of this is going to get into that question I asked you to think about at the beginning, which is how we're going to be addressing affordable housing, which is one of our requirements under the growth management. This has been one of the strategies identified, and if council doesn't want us to move forward with that, then that'll shape how we end up coming back with the discussions. But to get more specific, this is actually in addition to what we had previously were planning for. So when we did our land capacity analysis and our growth target numbers for jobs and for housing, this was not on the radar to be potentially a mixed-use zone. So this is all actually, if we move forward with this, this would actually be adding to the capacity for housing in the city.
So if we overbuild our amount, then we'll have to exceed that with the next planning cycle. Is that?
I'm not sure I quite understand what you mean by
well,
overbuild.
if we're building over capacity, we're building more than we really need to. Our number, the bar is going to raise. We've established a new base. The bar is going to go higher than that. That's one point. The other is, I've been here, I've been listening to a lot of discussion about the missing middle, and all I see is apartments. I see rentals, rentals, rentals. It's like one track. Where is the missing middle and the home ownership and the equity being discussed? I haven't seen that yet, so.
All right, I mean, that's one of the things you'll want to have when you get into the discussion part of this, when we talk about whether to move forward. These are great things to have conversations with your council member, with the rest of the council about.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right, anything else on this slide?
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So I had a question about the types of jobs. So a lot of the sections that we're looking at and the graph that you provided us, a lot of it is commercial. Have you ever heard of commercial on the ground floor and residential above it in a city of our size? Or are we looking at changing the dynamic of what general business is going to look like? Is it going to be more office and retail and we're going to lose the commercial? I'm trying to think of how to maintain the commercial we have while also maybe building out some of the other portions of it. But to my understanding, I've never seen a warehouse, like I'm thinking Haight Carpet, for example, on the ground floor and then, 4 layers of apartments on top. Have you ever seen that?
Well, I mean, your original question about commercial on the ground floor, I mean, that's what mixed use generally is. It's usually ground floor commercial, whether it's retail, whether it's office, whether it's restaurants, whatever it may use. Typically, with mixed use type development, you generally don't see warehouse with that. You could technically do it if somebody wanted to, but I don't think it's probably usually cost effective. Typically, what you'll see with a mixed use development is more of like, as I mentioned, types of retail or restaurants or, the typical stuff like we've seen like in some of the developments around here with the mixed use. So what you would see here basically with, if this was to move forward, is a change in the type of this area. You would probably see a change in the type of commercial that's there. Currently, a lot of this area is a lot more industrial, and a lot of it's actually very much underutilized in terms of land versus what's out there. And so what you would potentially be seeing with property owners is wanting to, this may be an incentive that they may potentially want to redevelop their property and make more efficient use of the land.
And just to follow on with that, how granular can we get within this particular zone of, if we want to maintain some of the more warehouse type industry, but also allow for the expansion of this mixed use, how granular can we get within the zone that we're talking about?
So when we get, if council decides that they want to move forward with this, right now we're at the comp plan process stage of things. So we're at the higher level laying the groundwork for it. How detailed or how you want to get specifically how this is shaped would be when we get into the zoning, which would be after we get through the comp plan. You may recall our schedule on that is that we are working to try to get through the comp plan, half of it by early 2024, and then we'll dive into the zoning in the early mid part of 2024. So we can try to hit our requirements by the end of 2024 for our periodic review update. So as much, you can get as much into that as you want at that stage. At this stage right now, we're just at the higher level laying the general, trying to determine whether we even want to move forward with this.
I have a couple questions. Are you seeing, I'm reading a lot about office space and vacancies in that from the work from home and post the pandemic. Are we seeing any of that increasing in the GB? Has that been a thing that we've noticed, or?
Are you talking about in terms of vacancies?
Yeah. Because you mentioned earlier vacancies in one of the slides.
Vacant properties. So properties that don't actually have a whole lot on them, or actually were identified as vacant, but it's because they have maybe 1 or 2 tin buildings on them, and they're not really being utilized right now. We do know that there's at least one of the warehouses in there has got pretty minimal use going on inside of it. And there's been some discussion, some of the other businesses, whether they want to stay up in that area or not. But again, if you kind of just generally go around, you can see over there by the railroad tracks what businesses are out there, and you can see that in some areas, you know, everything looks like it's pretty occupied, but in other areas, it looks like it's pretty underutilized.
Okay. And then you mentioned various affordable units. Do we know what percentage we're talking about, that those numbers are based on a certain percentage of AMI projections, or how did we come up with those numbers?
Well, affordable is going to be whatever council would define that as being, and some of that probably may also be influenced by the GMA, but we haven't dived into that at this point tonight. Again, this is kind of more the higher level, laying the general groundworks, and then when we get actually, again, if council wants us to move forward with this, and this does get adopted into the comp plan, then when we get into the zoning is when we'll dive into the details on that kind of stuff.
Okay. And I agree with Councilmember Taylor. I think this could be a good opportunity to encourage ownership opportunities, and that is absolutely something that we should be looking at. We are getting a lot of apartments, but we aren't getting, in my opinion, a sufficient number of ownership opportunities, so that's something we could look at, but some of that's dictated by the condo liability laws that we have no control over, so figuring that out would be something I would be in favor of. And then I've mentioned this before, I get concerned of us displacing a lot of services that city citizens or residents in Woodinville use. So I would like to consider ways that we might be able to encourage affordable commercial or retail in that area as well. And then I guess we're going to look at the traffic. That's also a concern of mine. So thank you.
Yeah, I would note for comp plan, one of the requirements, we also are supposed to look at things that used to not get looked at in planning as much, but is looked at now, is displacement, whether it's homes or whether it's commercial and stuff like that. So those are actually all parts of the analysis that ultimately will look at everything. But particularly if we're looking to change on this, this is one of the things that we would actually need to dive a little bit more detail into to understand what may happen in terms of displacement.
Yeah, and when I'm talking about services, I'm talking about services that, you know, you don't think about on a regular basis that have been displaced by some of the development. I would want us to take a look at it, that our residents are actually have businesses and services in a reasonable proximity for them to use. So I'm hoping we can take a look at that too. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Go ahead.
All right, so this next part of the analysis, some of this is kind of derived from some of the assumptions of the 0.3 floor area ratio. So using that as the assumption, because again, our zoning actually allows a lot more than that. Both the GB currently as well as the CBD zone allows considerably more than that. But generally, like I said, this is typically what we've been seeing when you start taking things like parking and everything else into account. So we could anticipate, based on this assumption, you could anticipate anywhere from around this almost 113,000 to 285,000 square feet of new commercial, but now this would end up replacing what's currently there. You can see the number, and I did this basically just as a backup napkin going through King County records, so this isn't, don't quote this as being 100% accurate. It was just basically my analysis going through and looking through King County and looking up the property records and stuff. But anyway, so when you look at that, there's roughly about 280,000 square feet currently in that area of warehouse and other kinds of spaces, including the office and retail. And of that, I estimate roughly about 100,000 of it's roughly currently retail office type space. The rest of this is, a lot of this, again, it's like a lot of your tin shed buildings and stuff like that, a lot of storage spaces and warehouses and stuff in there. Don't have an exact job numbers count currently in that area, so I'm not able to give you that information, but based on, again, the assumption of the 300 that I mentioned earlier, we could anticipate with the redevelopment of those properties, and those would be separate from the properties that won't be redeveloping. We could expect on those redevelopment anywhere from 376 to 947 jobs on there. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jeff, and he's going to talk to you about traffic.
This evening. So my name is Jeff Pearson. I work with Fair and Peers, and we're currently working with the city on the long-range transportation plan. So we were asked by staff to take a look at this additional kind of land use scenario in addition to what we've already looked at, and just kind of do a preliminary screening analysis on what some of the potential traffic impacts might be. The primary metric we're going to be looking at is intersection level of service, or the operations performance. So for this scenario, we started with our growth target assumptions, land use target assumptions out to 2044, and then we added additional growth on top of that. So we had to kind of pick a midpoint between all the options that were presented. We decided on 1,700 new housing units as kind of a mid-high range look at what might change there. We do need to assign those to a geographic location. So we looked at where the vacant properties were and where that growth might be distributed. So you can see that we have the majority of the development occurring in our traffic modeling west of 131st, 1,100 units there, and then the remaining 600 units between 131st and 134th, and then east of 134th. We did not change the jobs growth in this area for this analysis, but we did assume a transition away from more industrial type jobs to retail and office jobs. So those generate a higher number of trips. So even though the jobs growth isn't changing, we do see the impact in more trip generation, vehicle trip generation with that. So that was the scenario that we looked at. Trying to keep things at a very high level here, I did want to just kind of somewhat quantitatively describe where we are seeing new trips and the quantity of those new trips. So all of the kind of rectangles on the screen there are intersections that we looked at, and we calculated the growth in trips that we would see from kind of the 2044 scenario with the adopted growth targets, and then this additional growth in the GB zoning area. So far and away, the most trips that we see, the largest increase, over 500 new trips during the PM peak hour, is at the access point off of 131st, there where a majority of that development would occur. And then once you travel through that intersection, we do see trips kind of heading in all directions, north, east, south, and west. So the growth disperses. So one intersection does see a lot of those trips going through it, and then it kind of disperses pretty quickly. So we took a look at the entire range of where we would expect to see impacts, and these 8 intersections or so are where we identified as locations we wanted to take a look at. So we did take a look at both the AM and PM peak hour intersection level of service. This is a way of describing how the intersections operate on a letter grade scale from A being the best operations with limited congestion all the way up to level of service F, where the intersection is over capacity. So the city's current adopted threshold is intersections are required to operate at LOSE or better, which means that any of the dots showing up as red would be an impact under the city's current thresholds. The 3 scenarios that I have on the screen right now, you can see that we have the existing conditions generally are reflective of what's out there today. And then the middle scenario is that first future scenario we looked at, the adopted growth targets, and then the third is what would happen with the rezone. So what we can see is that in the future with the rezone, there are more trips going through the intersections. We generally see a little bit more delay at those locations. The only location that would pop up as an impact would be the intersection of 175th and State Route 202, where that would go from level of service E to level of service F conditions. All of the other intersections along the corridor do have sufficient capacity to stay within that level of service E threshold. And this analysis does assume the improvements with the trestle project, which is adding capacity along 131st. It's a very similar story when we go to the next slide for the PM peak hour level of service. We do see that the one intersection that would not meet the level of service thresholds is 175th and State Route 202. But in this case, that is an impact in both the growth scenario and the growth scenario with the GB rezone. So regardless of whether the rezone was allowed, we would see that intersection as needing some type of improvement in the future. The rest of the intersections along the corridor operate with level of service E or better conditions. And so just kind of by way of a quick summary, this was a kind of a preliminary screening analysis, see if there were any major red flags or how many intersections could potentially be impacted. We generally see that the network has sufficient capacity. There is one intersection that is impacted, but it's not every intersection along the corridor. We did also look at some of the proposed roundabouts that we're looking at along Little Bear Creek Parkway. We haven't completed that analysis yet, but our preliminary look does show that those would continue to operate within the adopted standards. Part of the improvements, there are a significant number of trips going through one intersection. So we did assume some minimal improvements that could be completed within the existing right-of-way, signal operations improvements just to help get those new vehicles in and out of that site. And that's something that the city could fund or could potentially be looked at as part of that development. Again, as I mentioned, there is one impact at an intersection that we've already mentioned, and then we have discussed some preliminary mitigation options, and one of the ones that came up frequently was looking at opportunities for additional access into and out of the site, and there are unfortunately there are limited options for that, especially kind of west of 131st, constrained by the river and the freeway. So, thank you.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, going back to the level of service F at 175th and 202, what would that look like? If I have Waze, it says I'm in a jam, it's 5 minutes delay. What would that backup look like?
We didn't specifically look at queuing in our analysis, but the average delay that we're seeing is around 2 minutes of average delay per vehicle under the future scenario. And then with the rezone, I believe that increased about 20 seconds of additional delay. So in increase, but I can't necessarily say in terms of.
Does it back up to another light or to another intersection, or the queuing seems like it would be something that would be very frustrating. I've lived in a busy area.
Yes, I would agree that if you were to, that queuing is definitely a concern in this area. And I think if we were to look at this analysis further, we would want to take a look not only at the kind of intersection delay operations from a level of service perspective, but also what that queuing looks like and how the intersections operate as a system, not just individually. Because I think is the potential for the queues to spill back through multiple intersections.
Is there any consideration what could be done with we've got 3 jurisdictions right there coming off the freeway. You've got Bothell, you've got the state, and then you have Woodinville. Has there been any thinking about how to optimize that?
I can take that one. So, Councilmember Taylor, for this the level where we are right now, we have just looked at what the impacts really, again, screening level analysis, depending on the direction council wants to move forward. We'll do more analysis in terms of, as Jeff mentioned, looking at not just the intersection level of service, but also delay, queuing, and mitigation as well.
So is it fair to say that when you build capacity, you push your bottleneck into a different area?
There's the potential for that, yes.
Yeah.
And so when we did this analysis, we did use the travel demand model that we built for the long-range transportation plan. So we incorporated this land use growth into our projections. And one of the things that the model does is it does reallocate trips based on congestion. So we do see that traffic patterns were shifting with all of these additional trips in this area. We do see some trips taking other routes to avoid the additional congestion there. So our projections account for how traffic might redistribute based on the new growth.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Just thinking about the intersection 175th and 202, of course we know what that means is more collaboration with the county. How large of a migraine headache would we be providing to you to work with them? I know that they tend to work at a very different pace than we do. What are our options there? Like, it's one thing if we expand an intersection on our own, but working with the county, how is that going to be in terms of mitigation?
It'll be county and also WashDOT. because it's a washed out, it's a state route. I think going through the Trestle project will definitely, hopefully help and build that relationship. But at the same time, yes, that is, time constraint and also just getting the buy off on whatever the proposal is, whatever the mitigation is.
So in terms of when to fix that intersection, do we wait until everything is built, or is that something that, obviously you'll be reading tea leaves, but would we be wise to improve that intersection before rezoning or before we allow construction there, or is it something that we can do after the fact?
So if you look at future, which is the middle one, that does not even include the rezone. So that is what we need for 2044 growth targets. So as part of our 2020, or as part of our transportation plan update, and one of the things that we would do in the draft project list is address that intersection. So that intersection will have to be addressed in our transportation plan that we are working on right now.
So when we address it, will it be the same solution for a future where we don't rezone and a future for where we do rezone? Is that going to change what the structure looks like, or is it going to be pretty much the same solution for both?
To be determined as we do more analysis and figure out, but as you can see, the trips, definitely there's the left lane that is definitely doing. So I think we'll need to dig into it a little bit. I definitely, again, don't do traffic every day, but I do understand there will be some modification, whether it's a signal modification, whether it's channelization, but there will be some modification for sure needed because of the number of trips that are coming that way.
Yeah, and I'd also just note also the fact that we have concurrency as a requirement. So to your point about the timing, although our concurrency requirements, our levels of service don't necessarily apply to 202, WASDOT does actually have an adopted, it's lower than RD, but it's...
Their level of service E.
Yeah, so again, concurrency still is one of the things that has to take effect. So even if we do the rezoning and stuff on this, improvements and stuff still for roads and other things still have to be in place for permits and stuff to be able to be issued for construction.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think that's a great point I was going to add, Robert, is that, right, the concurrency notion is that when that development occurs, they have to get concurrency, and a lot of times we've seen that with a lot of these development projects. They have to contribute to, or perform the mitigation of their impacts on the system. So we see that, for example, with Harvest, where they've widened the roundabout and where they're going to build the roundabout at 145th because their project impacted that. So that notion of concurrency, I think, is important to keep in mind. The other piece, and I'll just, I think, further on the answer that Asha provided to Councilmember Taylor on the kind of the three jurisdiction bottleneck further to the north there with Bothell, WashDOT, and City of Woodinville. If you recall, and I know it's been some years, so it's probably distant memory, but the city has a conceptual plan for that realignment of that interchange. Of course, that's not within our jurisdiction. That's WashDOT's interchange that they'll have to perform. But we have that conceptual that shows what the solution to that could and probably should be. But obviously, that's ultimately up to WashDOT and them coming up with the funding for that project. So there's that piece to also keep in mind. It's not a unknown. We have a plan for it, but it's not our plan to effectuate.
Obviously, there's a concern there, as I mentioned earlier, traffic. You know, we have other things that are going on that could affect traffic, both positively and negatively. We have the transfer station that's still up in the air, and one of the cases that we've made why just one of them, why the transfer station shouldn't be here is the intersections that this would impact. So, and that's going to be early 24, I understand, for that decision. We have a lot of, we're finally putting in our grid roads and we're expanding underneath the trestle, which is going to be all positives. But there's some digestion to do or to consider, and also, I would like to understand. I would like to understand out, because I've seen 2044 with the GMA. When are we running up against? I mean, the state's going to do what the state's going to do, but we just fought off some impacts to Woodinville with the last zoning. How longer term? I would like to understand better how we can be proactive about the GMA, and this is obviously maybe the best or the current opportunity to add some housing and affordable housing, but we have traffic impacts that are going to be difficult and require other entities to work with. So I would like to understand that better and what we're looking at out to 2044 or whatever the appropriate number is, because I'm very interested in maintaining and preserving our neighborhoods. So we do need to meet our GMA targets. Anyway, so I would like to understand that a little bit better when we go forward. Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. So in looking at our housing action plan that we've adopted, we said that there is a shortage of affordable housing between 2,720 and 3,105 units by 2040. So we're going to have to look at building out affordable units around the city. And this is an area that's already developed. It's not impacting neighborhoods that are out further. And I think that just knowing that even with the current growth coming, that we're going to have a failure at that intersection, and that this potential rezoning would expand that failure by maybe 20 seconds. I think it's worth us taking a look and seeing, number one, how could we make this work and have these additional affordable units come? But number two, what are those mitigation efforts that we can do? What can we partner up with Bothell and start lobbying the state to get, I think they're clover leaves, right? So that we're not having people taking left turns all over the place. That would significantly reduce the congestion on the 202 right there. And so I don't think this has to be an either or. I think it can be a concurrent discussion that we're having in terms of how do we bridge that affordability gap that we have identified and that we have in our adopted plan, and how do we mitigate these traffic impacts and start the effort now to get our state legislature to sit up and take notice that this is going to fail their level of service. So we need to address that. The second piece I wanted to address is on the affordability and owner-occupied. So does zoning, can it say that this can only be owner-occupied?
Zoning itself, I do not believe, I mean, Jeff may have to weigh in on that, but I don't believe zoning itself, you can zone to say that you have to build owner-occupied versus rental. That may potentially get into some property rights issues.
Yeah, I would, I mean, Mr. Ganson, I would love to hear what you have to say as well.
Yeah, I would share the concerns that Mr. Grumbach just articulated, that is a reach for zoning in terms of the city's authority. It's certainly something we would need to satisfy ourselves of through research that there is authority to do something like that.
Okay. So when we're talking about zoning, we're simply talking about, are we going to allow this to go from commercial only to mixed use commercial residential? At this point, there's no development on the table. We are not talking about if this is rental or if this is owner occupied. We're simply saying, yes, we're going to allow for this so that we can bridge some of this affordability gap, correct?
That's correct, and I brought this slide up because this is also in your staff report, because you actually touched on one of the important considerations. So we have to take into account and plan for low, very low, extremely low, and moderate income housing. So we're looking at everything from the 30% and below all the way up to 120%. We still have an analysis and stuff that we have to go. The Housing Action Plan kind of touches on it, but we actually haven't done the full analysis on that. Now, these aren't actual target numbers, but we have to be accounting for these in our plans, and we have to be able to identify if we don't have an ability, one way to do it, then we've got to identify things like barriers and stuff like that. So we've got this whole analysis that we have to do at looking at all of this. And this, whether the council decides to move forward with this or not, we have to do this analysis. It's just how that analysis comes out at the end will change based on what you decide for us to do as far as moving forward with this or not moving forward with this.
Okay, and then my final question here is, currently this area pays commercial, for the developed areas, pays commercial taxes for their property, but there's a lot of undeveloped area or underutilized area that potentially is undertaxed as well, which could further increase the tax revenue base for our school districts, for our city, for all sorts of projects that are going on around us if we were to take a look at this. Is that correct?
That part I would defer to our finance director about property taxes and stuff.
Well, if you redevelop an area, the overall assessed valuation would increase and the property value, and with that, the city would earn more property or would have the right to assess more property tax for that new value. You know, there might be offsets to that, so where the balance lies all depends on what's built and what's offset, or what it replaces and what's lost as a result. But the potential's there is the answer.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Rubstello.
Thank you. A year or so ago, when we started losing a lot of this inexpensive office around here, we talked about an incentive for maybe second floor office when we do mixed use. Have we ever moved forward with that?
That would have us jumping into the zoning regulations, and it's certainly something we can do. We just have to, you know, as part of this comp plan update, if council wants us to look at that with our, when we get into the development regulations, it certainly could be incorporated into that. We did take note. I mean, that I know that's been a direction from the council. It's just been the timing on when we get to it, and the comp plan process is kind of the ideal time. Comp plan and then development regulations being the ideal time to work on that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. I find the traffic analysis really, excuse me, compelling for this because the failure is in the cards already for us at these intersections. And so I think this highlights a need we have to start mitigating these intersections now. And as we look at potentially rezoning, we can just increase the mitigations that we were considering for the intersections that are looking to fail. I think that it is not the best strategy as a city to leave large parts of our downtown underutilized, vacant, and basically empty chain link lots. And so I would urge us to consider moving forward and further looking at what we would have to do to increase housing stock, increase the affordable housing that we have there, and just better uses for this space. I know it will, it's always a balance, it will displace businesses that have been in the city for a while, but it is a big area of opportunity, and I think that we need to move further in our exploration of what that looks like for the city. But keeping that hand in hand with that traffic mitigation plan, because we don't want to continue to add density, especially in a few of those particular choke points, kind of on the west side of that GB zone particularly. I know that that could be very painful for those of us who have to go through those intersections daily. So kind of keeping those two pieces hand in hand and moving forward would be my input.
Councilmember Taylor.
I would suggest that we go back and we really address the middle housing. So the ability for small families, young families to take root in the city rather than just step and repeat and build more apartments. That's the easy way out. That's not thinking. It doesn't take a lot of thinking to just turn it over and step and repeat. We did it here, let's do it again, let's do it again. But the end result is something that we might not really be proud of. An entire city of people that are making rent payments and not owning anything. And I do know that there are a lot of young families in my family that would like to come back into the area, but they refuse to be a renter and throw their check away every month. And it would behoove us to figure out how to get some owner equity opportunity built into the city as a solution. We do have condos in neighboring jurisdictions, and so I'm not really sold on the belief that one developer has a difficult time building condos, but there are other people that are building, owner-occupied locations. Even in Seattle, you've got a big group of development there. So I think we need to figure out how we can do it and then start discovering where we do it.
Yeah, so I would note that's a great point you're making about the missing middle housing. And actually, it's one of the things when I'm talking about this requirement to look at these different income housing, this actually does get pulled into that discussion. And is actually one of the requirements we will be doing as part of our updates. So this is only one component piece of this whole discussion. It's an important piece, but it's only one part of it because we do actually need to take a look, and we'll actually be having that conversation with you in more detail probably later this fall as we get a chance to put the analysis and put stuff together on this. But the missing middle housing is part of this conversation, but it's a broader conversation beyond just this GB mixed use zone.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
I'm probably not going to say anything that hasn't been heard, but I do want to be heard about the idea of exploring affordable ownership. We should definitely look into our potential there and being able to encourage that as a city. But the traffic remediation problem is key because it doesn't matter what kind of housing we put there if nobody's going to be able to get it in and out of the city, and that will frustrate everyone, including the businesses involved. And speaking about the state and the county and the folks involved there, I'm concerned about being able to meet our GMA targets. We do have a limited amount of space within the city, so we do have to take that into consideration as we open up this zone. What are our new targets that we have to hit, and how will we hit them?
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
One consideration with these failing intersections, I think, can also be attributed to the fact that our bus service level of service is, I would say, at a level F. So if we're going to talk about rezoning here, I think we might want to consider making it a priority when we talk to our county to say, if we're doing our portions here with jobs and housing, you got to help us out here. We're limited by where we can go because we're between a state route, we're between Bothell, we're in the midst of everything here. They've got to meet us halfway. There's no way we can meet these growth targets and afford to fix these intersections on our own. So I think this is something that we need to add to our legislative agenda moving forward, that, we sit in these ETP meetings and you constantly hear, well, we have to cut bus service and it just happens to be from Woodinville. So we can't meet our growth targets and hit these low income levels and have enough parking for cars, but then not exceed the levels that Olympia says we can do. So we really need to make sense of what they're telling us in Olympia and what it actually impacts for us on this. So I'd like to see, the stream buffer, what effect that has on parking structures over there, if that's going to limit the amount of parking we have. And if we don't have adequate parking, we don't have adequate bus service, is the county going to provide us with helicopter service? Because there's no other way for people to get in there. So I think that's something we need to explore as well, is, start pushing bus service more and getting that as a way to help alleviate these intersections, or at least eliminate some of the gridlock that we're going to see no matter what.
Another thing I'd like to add, just for discussion and future discussion and consideration, is that I would like to see an opportunity, and it's been mentioned before, some type of project in that area like Habitat for Humanity, where there is affordable ownership being built. I don't know how go about that, if that's actually required. It requires a certain amount of property to attract that type of development. It doesn't have to be Habitat for Humanity. It's just the most one I'm familiar with. The other thing we should consider, and it occurred to me when we're talking about traffic, is traffic for our residents is absolutely a concern, has been highlighted here. But I know that personally, I will avoid areas if the traffic's high to patronize those areas. If I struggle just getting to it, I will avoid that. And Woodinville has, we punch far above our weight for a city our size when it comes to retail taxes that I think we want to maintain. And we should be very cautious about causing more bottlenecks or failed intersections without a good mitigation, because there is a business impact and a tourism impact on that too. So I would want to throw that in the mix for our consideration too. Is there any more, Mr. Grumbaugh?
And just get some clarification as to whether you want us to continue moving forward with this as with our comp plan updates and stuff, or work on the periodic review. So some direction from council on this question would be really appreciated.
Does anybody want to weigh in on that? Councilmember Evans?
I say yes. I would like to keep exploring this. I think the opportunity to bridge our affordability gap is a big one, and we know what some of the issues are going in, so we can mitigate those. So I would like to keep exploring this.
Councilmember Arndt?
Same.
Same? Anybody else want to weigh in on that? I cautiously think we should explore. I mean, in order for me to support, we're going to need to answer some of these traffic problems. Of course, anything that we do is going to be a risk reward, and I'm very supportive of home ownership opportunities and affordable housing and affordable commercial, and of course, increasing our tax base as well are all positives. But we have a lot. Obviously, we have a lot of development going on, and I would encourage us to proceed very cautiously and very slowly in what we're doing before we bite off more. So, Deputy Mayor.
Also wanted to go on the record, I definitely agree with us continuing this approach. It's something we need to explore. It's probably a ways out. I think the year we put out there is 2044. So we have a little bit of time, but I've been at this a couple of years and realized that things can take a really long time to happen. So let's explore it now. We might be ready by 2043.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, I think we need to continue to explore. And I also think that we need to add something else to explore. And that's, we're the only city in the region that has not grown, and we're creating our problems. We're creating our own difficulty. We're knotted up. We've got one exit to the freeway, and we're putting all our growth right next to, the downtown. If we were to expand our city limits up or down and around, we haven't done that for 30 years. We incorporated and we've got this jigsaw puzzle of a city, and we have not done anything to push out, and other cities have. So I just think that we're creating our own problem because scarcity drives us to poor decisions sometimes, when maybe part of that solution is push out. So we've got enough time to also think about that and what it would buy us as far as having more real estate next to the highway, more intersections that are available for us to work with. So,
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So when you're talking about GB zone, are you just talking about the section that we've highlighted? So there's the entirety of the GB zone that goes all the way up to 195th. Are we just talking about that first section that we discussed in May, or is this analysis going to include that entire curve all the way up?
No, Sorry about that. It would include some CBD zoning, but it's what the council had given us the direction previously back in May for the GB portions, and then the CBD that connects it together would be, so it would be this boundary.
And what would it take to include the entirety of GB? I mean, if you're already doing the analysis on this section, does it make sense if we're talking about, what we're going to be doing as an update in 2044, does it make sense to look at the entirety of that GB corridor and just get it out of the way once and provide an analysis as opposed to doing a bit of a piecemeal approach?
Well, I mean, council had given direction to look at this, and I think some of what may have gone into that discussion before is the fact that some of the properties up north, further north, already have significant new development happening in them. That won't include residential, obviously. So that's both the Floor and Decor as well as the Innovation Center. And those are actually consuming quite a bit. And then also you have the hotel up there as well that wasn't more recently built. But if council wants us to expand on this, we can. This is just based on your direction back in May.
I'll just add one last thing. I would, not having experience with this, I would like to better understand, and I'm a little leery about how complex and slow it is working with the state and the county on some of this mitigation that will need to go on. So again, that's kind of my way of saying that we should proceed slowly and cautiously on this, but I'd like to learn more about how could we incentivize the state when they're telling us we need more affordable housing, but they're not working with us on the infrastructure that we need. We're told that we should move towards more public transit, and yet we're getting routes taken away. So how do we, I have no experience working with the state. We have made some good contacts in those areas, but I'd like to, in this process, learn more how we can move smartly forward and encourage or work with the state and the county to help us achieve all our mutual goals. So, anybody else? That give you a good sense?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Moving on to business item number 8, award of professional services agreement with Barry Dunn for the permitting operation improvement implementation. I think you're up again, Mr. Grumbaugh.
Actually, Asha is going to lead this conversation.
Okay.
But I'll support.
Okay, I just read it in the order that it was on the paper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm taking the lead in presenting, but Mr. Grumbach and Mr. Buchanan are both here apparently to help me with the presentation and if there are any questions. So it's a team presentation. I'm taking the lead. So really very brief presentation, again, hoping staff provided enough information, and so literally highlighting some of the information that is presented in the staff report and giving an opportunity for council to ask if there are any questions or anything else that is that council sees that's fit, and as we proceed with the implementation of some of the improvements in our permit operations. Just a very brief background. As council probably remembers, in 2021, council identified need to streamline and improve city's permitting process in light of all the growth, the number of permit applications that the city was seeing, and also to maintain the level of service. And in order to meet that goal, a contract was awarded to Strategica to conduct the permitting operation analysis. As part of that operation analysis, they reviewed the city's permitting current operating process and practices, interviewed, of course, stakeholders, and based on all that evaluation they did, they provided recommendations, including identifying not only approach to streamline the permitting process, but also staffing and also permitting software as well. So a lot of good information was in there, but also it had over 40 recommendations in the report, but that report was completed and presented to council spring of 2022. And right after getting that report done and presented, staff began implementation fall of last year. Council was provided with an update about where that implementation is earlier this year. And so just again, we are still in that implementation process. And just to give you just a more recap on what was presented in April, the staff has put together an implementation plan, which actually reviews all the recommendations that were in the operation analysis that Strategica did. Discussed lots of internal discussions with staff from different departments and developed the elements of that analysis report and additional priorities that staff saw would streamline those recommendations and help achieve those recommendations. In addition to combining some of those elements, we also prioritized recommendation. So trying to create some milestones and reach those milestones rather than having 40 recommendations, at least start saying how many we can chip away at it. So just creating some milestones, hitting those milestones. So we prioritize those recommendations and also organizing the work items. So breaking it down into chunks so that it is easier to implement and also easier to track the progress. This was the project scope of when we put the implementation plan together. Again, this was presented to council in April, but again, these are the big items that we took from the operation analysis, and as part of the initial implementation plan work, we put together 3 categories: process improvement, customer service, management, and reporting. So process improvement, of course, includes what internally the city review process, permitting process, but also, some of the processes that are with the applicants, with the developer, with citizens that put in for application, and overall process, completeness, compliance, everything from the starting of putting the application in till the end of the project closeout. So the entire process improvement. Then the next bucket, of course, was customer service. This was also a big highlight that we wanted to address, communication, making it user-friendly, and just providing assistance to applicants, especially on permits that could be complicated for like a single-family residence. So doing that customer service. And then lastly, management and reporting to understand how are we progressing on the process improvement and how are we doing on the permits that we have received and they're going through the process. It also helps with the goal of that management and reporting is also for staff to see where the progress, how can we change what is working, what is not working, and any other reporting that we would need to better understand both for internal users and external users. So these are the 3 categories that we are trying to implement. And of course, as we are going through this implementation, we are working on, as I mentioned, prioritizing. So we are working on, almost looking at elements in each category and see are there ones that are low-hanging fruit and how can we address those? So we've been doing that since the implementation process started last fall. This is just, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just wanted to give you overall like a high-level milestone. As I mentioned, we started this earlier, implementation started earlier this year. We have made quite a bit progress. Definitely, the implementation process is in there. We also did, one of the recommendations of Strategica's report was to hire a GIS coordinator that would help implement some of the customer service to, get the permit, the portal as well, user-friendly and easy to understand. And so we do have, and then also internally providing information about permits that they don't have to, connect with every city staff. There is easily available information that we can provide. So all this was part of the GIS coordinator's position. So we did hire a GIS coordinator. Actually, maybe today was her first day. So we do have that person on board, And we look forward to working with that person in implementing some of these recommendations. So we are making progress, but we have ways to go. We have a lot of, as you can see, rest of this year and into next year, we have a lot of work to do in terms of our process, in terms of software update, in terms of just reporting. And so there's a lot of information that we need to still process and need to work on. So there is that. The goal is, of course, go live with our new permit portal by next summer, at least almost like a test drive, and see what changes, even if there are little ones, we wanted to see how that works. So summer is the goal, but again, that would just come as, that would be our initial go live, and then we'll keep refining and adding with the whole, with the goal that by end of December 2024, we have implemented all the 3 categories, not just process, but the portal as well as any reporting. So we are going to continue working on it, refining our permit portal, and continue to work on the process. So it is a good 2-year project for us, but seeing milestones and progress at some of those ones, as you can see, next summer would be definitely what we are targeting, and we want to stay at that those milestones. But as you can also see, I want to just go back on these milestones. There is a lot of, as you can see, there are 40 recommendations in that strategic report. And they're not just simple changing the process in permit software or just doing handouts. There's a lot of process and a lot of effort and coordination that'll go into this. And because of staff's time, especially some of the key member, their time is still being, and I will stop for.
Deputy Mayor Randolph, you have a question?
This is just a point of clarification. Yeah. If we accept this contract, will we see incremental changes for the end user, whether that end user is someone inside the city office or outside actually requesting a permit? I'm trying to understand, is this something that we will not see the end of until the end of, June 2024, or will they be incremental changes that we can see improve throughout this process?
And so it will be an incremental change, incremental implementation, I should say. So I think the June that we were saying is to actually hopefully go live with our permit portal, which we already have, but it will be the new refined version that we would hopefully go live. But there are other steps that we would do, like the handouts, or whether it is even the mapping. We have the new GIS person coming online. Are there mapping work that we can do and put it in customer portal? Can we put that together? So there's a lot of pieces in that 40 recommendation. Not all 40 recommendations are end of, in June or end of next year, but there are incremental changes that staff would like to implement and do.
And I would just add, one of the reasons why we have the request for the consultant is because without that help, incremental will get dragged out even further. Because that's one of the challenges right now, is that we just don't have the full resources right now to implement these changes and stuff. We've been trying to work on them, but we need additional resources and help, even to try to meet the timeline that we're talking about now. So one of the reasons why we're presenting this to you tonight, making the request.
And I think that's pretty much it. We just want to continue, of course, the implementation, but accelerate the current pace of that implementation. So just the primary scope would be that the consultant would facilitate that implementation, lead some of the key deliverables, provide technical guidance, best practices, recommendation, and of course, coordinate the actual software reconfiguration itself. This is just, again, all this is in we did go through the request for proposal process. We've received 4 responses to our RFP. We interviewed 3 firms and felt very done to be the best fit to perform the work that we had proposed. Barry Dunn's estimate came at 98,000, little over 98,000. Our 23-24 budget did include some budget, but that was more for GIS, for software upgrades, permitting software consultant support, but no budget allocation was for any additional support for implementation. So if approved, this work will be funded by the Development Services Fund, which also collects the permit fees. So I just wanted to mention that it is initially the goal, of course, would be to use the Development Services Fund versus general fund. And this proposal, this budget adjustment will be included in the mid-biennium budget adjustment. That should be it.
Questions? No questions? Do I have a motion?
I move that the City Council award an agreement for the permitting operation improvement implementation to Barry Dunn in the amount of $98,500 and authorize the city manager to take actions as needed to implement this action.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Deputy Mayor Randolph.
I can understand, we've talked time and time again about the lack of staffing that we have, so we really wanted to improve our permitting process. I don't request a permit often, but when I do, it can be confusing. So I imagine I'm not the only one. So I'd love to see this move forward and see some of the incremental progress that will be helpful for both city staff and people who are actually requesting permitting move faster.
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. Yeah, I support this because I know how stretched the staff is and how just streamlining some of these things could just free up staff from having to answer the same question over and over or go back again and again and have all these one-on-one conversations. And so I know this will streamline the process for all and ultimately reduce the cost on the city because we're not having to spend our time on these more mundane tasks that can be automated, but we're able to really dive into the harder tasks where we really need your brains to figure out the hard problems. So I think it's a good investment here.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
I know this has been a long time coming with staff, and I appreciate that you came to us for additional funds to get this moving a little bit faster. That means that you guys really bought into this process. So I know that it works better if we're all sort of pulling in the same direction. So I know it's another $98,000, but I think it makes a lot of sense that it's something that you guys see, and ultimately it's going to make it better for you. And I know that our Planning Commission chair in the audience got a little smile hearing that today was the first day of our GIS mapping analysts. So this is a very big day. This is going to be, I know, a long haul for you guys, and having someone guide you a little bit along the way so that you could do other important business of the city. Thank you for coming to us with this proposal, because that really does show you hear what the citizens have been asking for, you hear what we've been asking for, and you're looking for ways to make this work. So thank you for all the work you've done on this.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. And in addition to all of the reasons my fellow council members have mentioned why I support this, just to link it back to our previous discussion about affordable housing, I was in a discussion with an affordable housing developer who said that permitting time was one of the biggest obstacles they had to developing some affordable housing in nearby jurisdictions, because unlike other developers, they don't have as much resources sitting behind them as they're going for these projects. So streamlining this process for the city will also help us reach our other affordable housing goals.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Number 9, approval of resolution number 627, Parks Vending Program. Mr. Hill or Mr. Herzog?
All right, this will be me. Just give me 1 second here. All right, good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Jared Hill. I will be presenting resolution number 627 to establish a Parks Vending Program. The concept of a parks vending program has been mentioned throughout the years, and this resolution would establish the parameters to allow staff to enter into contracts with businesses for vending opportunities that will help support local shops and enhance the park visitor experience. Vendors or concessionaries can take many forms, but some examples to help visualize this concept is perhaps a paddleboard rental at Wilmot Gateway Park or a pop-up coffee stand on Festival Street. As you can see in the staff report, today's parameters being established limit locations to Wilmot Gateway, DeYoung, Rotary, and the sports field / Festival Street. Operating hours would match park hours with an hour for setup and cleanup on each end. Items such as alcohol and tobacco would not be permitted, and the city would reserve the right to make rules and regulations to best implement this program. Later this year, when council begins to consider the budget, nominal fees will be suggested as part of the annual fee ordinance. So, if council decides to adopt this ordinance, next steps would include staff finalizing draft contracts and applications, developing a vendor selection process, and program fee suggestions. Staff is happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So in reading through the proposal, I didn't see anything talking about the permissibility or allowability of overnight storage at the parks, either in a parking lot or in the park itself. It's not in this contract here. Is it allowed in code? Is it something that would be on a case-by-case basis? How is that going to be dealt with?
Yeah, so from my understanding of how we would be implementing the program, it would be expected that it would need to be cleaned up an hour after park closure in an ideal situation, but for a case-by-case situation, it might make sense to modify that with each specific vendor's contract. For example, if someone is going to be selling or doing a paddleboard rental at Wilmot Gateway Park, they might not be able to completely pack that up at the end of each day. So that would be looked at a case-by-case situation.
So in that case, we would be having storage either in the park or in the parking lot itself. Would that be an increase in the fee that we would charge? Because it would be either taking away space in the park or it would be taking away parking for people to enjoy the park. Would that be an additional consideration to each application, and we would have to adjust, based on the impact of, for example, the paddle boards? I imagine that they would want to keep it there for 3 months. For 3 months of not having access to that parking space and that space down by the river, that seems to me that would have to be a significantly more expensive permit than someone who is a pop-up coffee shop at Festival Promenade on I can't think of this, Farmers Market days.
Yeah.
So do we have the mechanism in place to adjust and think about that, or is that something that we're just going to have to come up with on the fly? I'd like to have a plan in place before something like this comes up, because an impact of one is significantly different than the impact of another, and I'd like to sort of weigh what that difference is.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Definitely would be looking at that as part of the annual fee ordinance that we bring back to you later this year as part of the budget process on what different fee structures would look like depending on the amount of public space being used. And that's an excellent point to make sure we raise at that time. As far as storage, I don't think that has come up as part of the conversation yet. But as the contracts get built out with the different vendors, that would definitely be something we would be ideally having all of the items be picked up after park closure. And the parameters do spell out that if the vendor leaves a mess or leaves any sort of mess behind, they would be responsible for paying for the cleanup of that.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. I noticed that the linear park along East Rail is notably missing for this. I would like to amend to have that added as you're working on Resolution 627.
Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, if I could just add a couple thoughts on that. We left that park off because it doesn't quite exist yet, and also understanding that this first rollout of the program is just that. We can always come back and tweak it. We would come back likely when that park is ready to be established and provide recommendations with regard to that at that time.
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. Have you thought through or have you had any conversations about how this would work? So, for example, if it's a canoe or stand-up paddleboard rental at Wilmot Gateway, what happens when we have Celebrate Woodinville in the same spot? What happens when we have any other, like Pride that happened there? Would they need to totally clear out? And back to Councilmember Best-Campbell's question, where would the storage be? Because those, especially Celebrate Woodinville, takes up a significant amount of space, and we wouldn't want to really hone in on that as people are trying to come enjoy it. So has that been thought through?
Yeah, I think you and Councilmember Best-Campbell raise a great point about the storage. The way we have the parameters written, it allows the city to enter into a contract on a case-by-case situation, with the thought process being that each of these vendors are going to look a little bit different. So it's hard to establish parameters that are the same for both a pop-up coffee shop, like say Sidekick wanted to roll a cart over, versus like a kayak or canoe type rental. So I think that in each individual contract would assess the needs for storage as they're presented, but we wouldn't put anything forward that would impact large events like that.
Okay. And I think this goes back to a lot of the feedback we've heard from our community in terms of wanting more recreational opportunities, more, more reasons to go to our parks and visit. And so I think it's a really good thing to explore. There's just some details that I'm interested in really nailing down before we agree to anything. So if we move forward with this, we would still have the opportunity to look at contracts to get all of these specifics answered, correct? We're not just giving a blank slate for the city to go make contracts and have this show up next week. Or are we?
I think as we've envisioned it tonight, we would have proposed the program parameters, and that kind of gives us a basis from which to operate and develop the contract process, develop the application process, making sure that applicants fit the number of criteria that we've laid out tonight. And moving beyond that, we perhaps even envision Public Spaces Commission helping us formalize some of these contracts as we get a little closer to that. And then the city staff would be handling the contracting with those selected businesses. And if council wants that brought back for further discussion, we could probably do that.
I like the idea of having public spaces really weigh in on this and really think through this. I think, there are experts who are deep into this area. But personally, I would like to have it come back to us and have a report in terms of here are the parameters and have some of the answers to the questions that we've raised as well.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yeah, what about, okay, so if they're leaving equipment overnight because of the logistics, how about if they're camping or staying? I've seen that at some of the aquatic activities around that the proprietor brings in a little motorhome or a camper or something like that. Is that, I don't see it covered here.
Mr. Fritz, looks like you're reaching for your microphone.
Well, that would be prohibited by code because camping's not allowed in our city parks. Would be my first answer. So we don't need to address it in this particular policy. But if we had a concern with a vendor expressing the desire to do that, we would just simply write it as into the contract that it's not allowed. I mean, that would be just our approach to deal with it. But it's not allowed by code, so it wouldn't be permissible.
I had a couple of thoughts on, so we talked about the paddle boards, kayaks. I think one of the, not far from Wilmot, which is where we're going to put the permanent stage, there's an opportunity at Wooden Creek Park that's underutilized where maybe there could be storage there that would be appropriate or some proximity to that. And yeah, we're not going to allow, it's not allowed to have parking so that overnight, so that would take care of itself. I'm wondering, I have a few questions. So have we anticipated getting this off the ground, like startup costs? Are there any costs associated with implementing this that hasn't been highlighted?
As far as costs, it would only be the cost that we'd be seeking to recoup with the program would be the administrative costs for the contract development itself, and that's at this time the only cost anticipated.
Okay, whatever those costs are, can we use park impact fees to offset some of those? Is that a possibility?
I'm going to defer
No?
to.
No, I see Mr. Fritz saying no.
Yeah, no, the point being the fee that we referenced in the presentation, that would go to offset the administrative costs of the contracts.
Okay. I agree with Deputy Mayor Randolph. I would like to, rather than have this discussion all over again, I think the linear park, and we can name a park to be named later, as an opportune time to incorporate some of this that we're talking about, rather than discussing it again and having that. So I'd rather see us be a little bit more efficient and incorporate that. We have lots of residents that hasn't been discussed that I talk to them on a regular basis that are looking for more recreational opportunities than just wine tasting. We have an opportunity to do some aquatic things, paddleboard, kayaks. We have opportunity to add some bike rentals, whether they're electric or regular bike rentals. Again, I've said it before, I'm not in favor of the Lime scooter things laying around, so I'd like maybe a electric bike docking station so there are put away. We have opportunities at Rotary Park, for example, being close to the high school. I could see a food truck or two being very, very popular there. And again, on the linear park, there's opportunities on a long stretch there that we're going to add significant parking there that would be accessible to our trail. So we have lots of opportunities to provide some recreational opportunities, and I would encourage us to look at different demographics, age groups, and not only just adults, but tweens and kids to involve in this also. So I'm in favor of moving forward on this. I don't know how long. I think Public Spaces has looked at this for quite some time, I think. I am in favor of moving forward deliberately on what this may look like, and we have lots of opportunities. One thing we hadn't talked about is there's going to be a certain amount of tax revenue recouped on whatever this looks like. Have we projected that out, or is that just, it's really such an unknown at this time as far as what that might provide for the city?
I think that's, what you're getting at there. It's a little unknown. It depends on operations, hours, and the vendors, and the location, and a bunch of different factors. I think we'll have a much more information on what we could possibly do in that regard after a year or so.
Okay. Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So how many businesses in city limits have expressed interest in doing vending in the park? So we're talking about improving revenues for in-city businesses, but we're talking about a vendor for paddleboards, for example, who's not from city limits. So what interest level have you seen from people within city limits? And by expanding this program, are we going to be detracting from the businesses within the city?
I'll answer the former question first. I have heard from, I believe, 0 businesses within the city that have indicated interest in operating the parks. I've heard from 2 or 3 in the past maybe 3 years from outside the city that have indicated interest. Hard to say whether or to what extent that would have an impact on businesses within the city.
And then the question was, and I guess this is more of a philosophical question, do we want our parks to be another retail space? Part of the beauty of parks, I think, is that you're free from everything except trees, nature, and a place to go get sweaty and walk and ride your bike. I can appreciate the need for more recreation, but I also appreciate that you don't have to have any money in your pocket to enjoy a beautiful park. My understanding is that we haven't had much uptake on the previous park vending program that we've had. This seems to be perhaps making it a little bit more specific about what we're looking for, but I don't really see that much interest in vending in the parks. Having this program available, I guess, is fine, but, as a whole, I generally like parks to be free from, as opposed to full of, for price, for cost, for whatever. I just think it cheapens the park experience. We pay so much money to make these parks beautiful, and what makes them beautiful is the quiet and solitude, and, kids have a playground and there's nowhere else to go. So I'm concerned that we would be supplanting some of the business revenue from Woodinville city businesses, and I just don't like the look otherwise that's coming.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Speaking to the lack of requests for this within the city, a lot of people view this as a possible incubator. Nobody starts a business, or very few people start a business. More people are capable of starting a business by saying, hey, I'm going to expend this amount of money to go sell my cookies out by the farmer's market or out at this park to see if people actually like my cookies. And now I have a cookie business that I can spin up to something much larger in the city. People generally start small, and this gives us those small opportunities that people can act on. And speaking to the idea of, making sure that we have spaces for kids to interact with nature, we have wood trails. We're working on wood trails. We're going to continue to have wood trails, and it's not on this list. So that will be an opportunity for nature, and we have plenty of opportunities for folks to hike. And I'm hoping that when we start work on this, there'll be limited areas where vendors will be allowed. And if you want to see a kid exercise, tell a 5-year-old that there's an ice cream truck a mile up the street, and you'll get the level of activity that you're looking for.
Councilmember Arndt.
I just want to thank you for bringing this forward tonight. I know the Public Spaces Commission has been discussing this for several years, and they are very enthusiastic about bringing new opportunities to our parks as a place that can be an incubator, as a place that provides new and different recreational opportunities, and just as a way of providing more amenities in the parks that we currently have. I think the current list of parks is a good one for this. Of course, I would love to add the linear park when it is officially a park. I don't know if it's more efficient or not to do that at this juncture, or to wait until it's actually a park. But I would support this current iteration, and I think that is something that we have had people come to our council and ask for, and certainly the Public Spaces Commission has been asking and deliberating on for many years.
I'd also like to add that I think when I talk to our residents around, there is in Woodinville, there's a startling lack of opportunities for recreation, and we've intentionally grown the downtown, and things like biking or paddle boards and kayaks and stuff that sometimes precludes because of lack of space. You don't have, if you're in a 1,100 square foot apartment, you have no ability to store a kayak or a paddle board, so you absolutely need a rental opportunity, and same for sometimes for bikes and other opportunities. And we're building out our parks and our trail system. We're currently undergoing the East Rail, our connection to the East Rail corridor, which is going to be a great opportunity to stretch all the way from the north end of town down to past Chateau Sammamish Valley and on south as far as you're willing to go. I think we desperately need for our residents more opportunities at all ages for different interactions with our parks and trails, and it can be different. That we have different parks that serve different needs, and some of these can be in the core downtown can be very recreational oriented, and some of our other parks can be that nature kind of solitude type of thing. I think we can. It doesn't have to be an either or. I think we can do both, and I think our residents deserve more opportunities and both. And public spaces, as Councilmember Arndt said, has been at this for quite some time. We have a significant amount of park impact fees coming in from development right now. And so we have a good opportunity to start building out our parks and providing more opportunities for our residents. So I'd like to see this move forward.
I move that the City Council approve Resolution number 627, establish parameters for a parks vending program.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Deputy Mayor's maker a motion.
I don't think I can add to what's been said already. It's an excellent opportunity for small incubators. It's a fantastic opportunity to create a sense of place. I think about places that I've been where there is absolutely no commercial viability except for a long stretch of food trucks that's only there one day of the week, and that becomes an event for a community. And we've talked a lot about building community, and I think this would be part of that.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So I appreciate the interest in providing a sense of place, but let's remember that Woodinville is a very small community and our parks are very compact. And, for the most part, people in Woodinville are resourceful and they know how to have more activity. I think that the commercialization of open space, something should be sacred. I think that, parks aren't for sale. I don't care if it's for an incubator or paddleboard or anything else that people want to do there. I think that we all know how to be creative on our own, and just leaving the parks alone is what I would hope for. I already know this isn't going to pass, but I'm voting my conscience, and I don't think our parks are for sale.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I mean, we're talking about Rotary Park. It has a skate park. We're talking about Wilmot, which already has play structure, and we have a pretty robust, heavily used trail, biking trail that goes through that. We're talking about Rotary Park, as I mentioned. It's next to the high school. I think it would be very welcome to have some options there within walking distance for our kids. We also have in the last, 3, 4, 5 years, we've added a tremendous amount of residents to our downtown area that have no ability to recreate just by storage opportunities or space. So I do think that we need to provide that opportunity. And I hear on at least a weekly basis from parents that want more opportunities for every level of kids to actually enjoy our parks and trails. And we have adults that would like more opportunities. I spoke to people over at Wooden Creek, and they're very excited about the opportunity to provide vouchers to some of their residents to be able to use some of these facilities for the residents as an amenity. And we're talking hundreds or thousands of people that would have that opportunity. So I look forward to providing more recreational opportunities in an already heavily used trail. And the linear park connecting to the East Rail Corridor is not only a recreational opportunity, this is going to be an opportunity for people to commute in a very sustainable way from the north end of Woodinville. You'll eventually be able to go up to Sammamish. You'll be able to eventually you could commute on that trail to Kirkland if you want. You could commute to Redmond, Bellevue, all the way down to Jean Coulon Park and Renton. And so I think this is a great opportunity and would be a good service to our residents. So I support the motion. No other discussion? Can we get a roll call vote on this, please?
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Rubstello?
Yes.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
No.
Mayor Millman?
Yes.
Councilmember Arndt?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes.
And Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you for the presentation. Let's see. Okay, business item number 10, approval of resolution number 628. Councilmember assignments. Mr. Hill.
Great, thank you. Just give me 1 second to pull this up. All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Millman and council members. Before you is resolution number 628, which forms the 2023-2024 council member assignments and helps fill vacancies that are currently in place. We have a few spots where the alternate member is currently being utilized, and with some modifications, we can ensure we are participating in as many of these forums as possible. As the city manager mentioned in his email to council, there was a slight error with Exhibit 1A, and an updated committee roster has been sent to you and will be on the following slides. As you can see, we have 5 vacancies currently. Typically, this item would have been brought to council during the first few weeks of 2024, but Councilmember Rubstello recently indicated a need to step down from 2 assignments, at least one of which doesn't currently have an alternate able to step into the primary role. Per council rules, we will bring this back in early next year for any additional modifications council may wish to implement. Here you can see the current assignments on the modified Exhibit 1A. I have also included committee descriptions as attachment 2 in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions, and before I go back to the current assignments slide, here is the suggested motion sequence to fill vacancies and then to approve the resolution.
Are we ready for questions?
Yes.
So I have one question, and I'll ask you with our rules. Councilmember Rubstello has indicated vacating a couple of those slots. Is the LTAC, I don't know the time frame of LTAC or the, if there's any upcoming meetings, is that going to be a vacant position that we're going to need to fill also, or is that something that we're just going to leave the same? Do we?
There's one meeting this fall, and I'm signed up to go to it.
Okay. Okay. Looking at, I already reached out to the chamber alternate, and Councilmember Evans had indicated a willingness and ability to step up to be the liaison for that. Nobody indicated, I asked for interest on some of these assignments. Nobody indicated anything on the East Rail. I'm willing to step up on that and be a representative on that, and then probably revisit that. That can be revisited in January again. Other than that, I think we're pretty much covered. And again, nobody else has stepped up for any of these other roles, so I would like to fill those with what I suggested and appoint those and see if the council wants to step up to that. So, Councilmember Evans.
So I have filled in for Councilmember Rubstello on East Rail before. I'm happy to step into that, but I don't think that Councilmember Arndt, Randolph, and myself are all needed on the ETP. I think we could just have Councilmember Arndt and Randolph continue there, and I can just switch over to East Rail. And I'm happy to do that. I've filled in before. So, and I'm happy to continue with the chamber as well. I've been going to those meetings for, I don't know, a year.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Arndt.
I'm happy to continue at the NPRSA.
Okay, well, I'll modify my appointment for that, and Councilmember Evans is willing to step up for the East Rail. I appreciate that, and also the chamber. I would forward those appointments as for consideration for council. Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So for MISWAC, we're supposed to have a staff representative going to those meetings. Since we don't have one, have we had somebody going and covering that particular meeting? There's a lot of things that are discussed there that do have relevance, particularly to the NERTs. We do need to have someone who attends those meetings.
I would need to check the exact committee schedule for that, but I believe we have had staff attending those meetings.
Any other discussion, questions? Seeing none, I appoint the two I'd mentioned earlier for Councilmember Evans for East Rail and Councilmember Evans for Chamber. Do I need a motion for that, I'm assuming?
Yes, so you would be moving to approve Resolution 628 as amended.
As amended, correct.
Okay.
Can
I move that the City Council approve Resolution number 628 for the 2023-24 remaining council member assignments as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Randolph, discussion?
Not a lot of discussion here, just I know how important it is for our voice to be heard in all of these appointments that we have. There's only a few of us, and there's very few opportunities for us to speak for Woodinville, and this gives us that opportunity.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
One thing to note, the coverage on all of these committees is the same 4 people. That's because there's only 4 votes for those 4 people. We don't have robust coverage. We don't have different voices. It's the same voice on every committee. It doesn't really behoove anybody else to ask to be on a committee because there are 4 votes to have the same 4 people. So these are the 4 voices that you have.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Yeah, I have to point out that Mayor Millman did say that he requested for other people to reach out about positions. And if there's something that you saw that you want to be on, definitely reach out and make sure that your voice is heard.
I'd also, I would like to see us move on from this and approve this. We have there'll be another chance for council to address this in January, and that will allow a certain juggling of the workload. And the way I approached it last January was I asked council what their priorities were and what their ability, and tried to put everybody in what their priority was and their ability to actually fulfill those roles. So that can certainly happen again in January as we look at this. So I approve of them. I'll vote for that motion. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 11, update on discussions with Zipley regarding the franchise agreement. Mr. Fritz.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. One moment while I try to get the document loaded, or the presentation loaded. Here we go. So I have for you this evening a brief update on our discussions with Zipley regarding the franchise agreement. Just as a background, the city has 2 non-exclusive franchise agreements for cable or video services right now. That's Comcast, also known as Xfinity, and with Zipley. Zipley and its predecessors of the franchise agreement have not met the terms of the agreement in terms of expanding their network. And as a result, Zipley is liable for the last 3 years of that franchise agreement, liquidated damages of $60,000. We brought that issue to council last May, asking for some guidance on how council wants staff to address this issue with Zipley. Zipley had expressed concerns about the ability to build out in the market given costs and making it pencil out from a business point of view. Some of those concerns were permit fees, requirements to underground, making it too costly to pencil out. They also had some concerns about ending the franchise at the expiration date, which is next month on the 23rd, because it would require them to abruptly cancel their cable services for the remaining customers that they have subscribers for in the area, but they were planning on keeping that service open for other customers within their market, and hoping to be able to close out that service in sometime in the near future. And so they were seeking to have the franchise agreement extended without extending their liability for not building out the franchise area. So that's just a little bit of background of what we discussed at the last time in May. And the feedback that staff heard from that council meeting was that they're not in favor of extending the agreement, and that council is not in favor of extending the agreement, and that council would be amenable to some sort of compromise where the 31 cable subscribers in Woodinville receive some sort of accommodation, and in turn there would be some sort of reduction of liquidated damages in exchange. So staff approached Ziply with the proposal, I think in June, that if Ziply provided an incentive for those 31 customers to get off their subscription service for cable services by providing 6 months of free internet service to those customers, that the city could potentially waive or reduce $30,000 worth of those liquidated damages. Ziply was amenable to that and wanted to discuss it further. They also, in that same conversation, counter-proposed an addition to that, to the city's proposal, where Ziply would agree to expanding the internet services, or as they describe it, telecommunication services, into the 3 underserved areas of Woodinville. Those 3 underserved areas are the Wellington area, West Ridge area, and then the southeast hill portion of Woodinville. There's roughly a 1,700 service gap in terms of customers not served by Ziply because the infrastructure is not there. They expressed the desire to make it affordable for them to do the build out, for the city to look at allowing for 2 alternative methods for placement. They would still be undergrounding methods, but they're not the traditional trenching that the city typically authorizes. And those were soft surface placement, which is a mechanism where it takes conduit and puts it under the ground around a foot to 18 inches below the surface, and seals up that soft surface as the machine moves along. The micro trenching is basically cutting a narrow trench in the roadway along the rain gutter portion of the road system, and then again it would be roughly 12 to 18 inches below the surface, and they would lay conduit and then patch the micro trench versus doing a wider trench process to get that conduit in place. And they asked that the remaining liquidated damages would be reduced, provided that they could expand their services into those areas. The status of those discussions as of today is the city has provided Ziply with a proposed settlement agreement on the 6 months of free service for their cable subscribers, and the reduction of a portion of the liquidated damages. Ziply has not responded to that, but in a conversation I had with Ziply today, that one of the things that has occurred in the last month or two is that they've seen a significant drop-off in their market in total of cable subscribers. and they're rethinking their need to even continue services into, further into the year at all. And so they're not certain that there's a need to proceed with that portion of the proposals that are being discussed, and they won't know until they see numbers later next week. So there's some ambiguity there on whether or not there's still interest in going down that road. The staff is currently reviewing both proposed methods for installation of fiber cable, both the soft surface and placement and the micro trenching. The goal is to make sure that it doesn't put undue stress or damage on our roads, and that it's a viable undergrounding method for the purposes long term. Ziply is working on a full analysis of expanding that into those service areas. And that analysis includes not only how much of that service gap they could close, but what installation methods they would need to use to close those gaps. In that analysis, what they've disclosed to me today is just with the soft surface placement, they could reach 1,100 of the service areas that aren't currently reached. So that would be reducing it from 1,700 down to roughly 600 areas that wouldn't be reached after they did a soft surface placement expansion. So in addition, as of today, Ziply has acknowledged that the city has not waived any claims to liquidated damages by virtue of the expiration of the franchise, which gives us some wiggle room to continue to negotiate beyond the August 23rd date for this expansion proposal. Given the fact that the council is not meeting again in August and the expiration of the franchise is on August 23rd, there is the possibility that Ziply will say, yes, we want to do the option of providing free internet service to these remaining customers in Woodinville, and we would like some reduction in liquidated damages for that. And so we're asking that council consider providing the authority to the city manager to enter into one or more of these settlement agreements substantially in the form as presented here in this presentation. And I'm happy, both Mr. Buchanan and I are happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. Can we back up a slide, please?
Sure.
So as I was reading this, Ziply is working on a full analysis of expanding the service area. So basically they're asking us to waive these fees, but they're not fully committing to expanding their service area, which I thought was part of what we had agreed to.
What they're working on is they've already said that it doesn't pencil out to expand under our traditional requirements for the infrastructure placement. What the analysis is if they were allowed to consider soft surface placement and micro trenching, does that expansion pencil out? And if they said that most likely in those three areas it pencils out, if we allowed both, they would pencil out in almost all of the three areas. There's some small portions of the southeast area of Woodinville where the geographics are different, and that it likely wouldn't pencil out under any of these methods.
So I know for residents, especially of the West Ridge, there are areas that are bumping up against Bothell, bumping up against Kirkland that have service area, but the Woodinville side of the West Ridge does not. And I know I've heard from many many people that they want this fiber option and they want some competition for Comcast Xfinity. So that was part of the reason why I was in favor of waiving some of these. But if they're not going to fully commit to a time frame in which they'll do this, I think we should hold our feet to the fire, because this is what they did with their cable service too, is that they just drug their feet and kept saying, well, it doesn't pencil out. And I'm just afraid that they're going to do the same darn thing here, and then our citizens aren't going to get the benefit that we think they're going to get by waiving some of these damages.
I would agree with you, and any settlement agreement for the build-out component would have to include timelines.
Yeah, for sure. And significant penalties if they don't hit those timelines. Because I think that they just keep using this excuse of it doesn't pencil out. Because, I mean, there's so much right around here that they can do and lots of new customers right here. Why would they want to go further out where it does cost more money? My second question is, do we have concerns about soft surface placement and or micro trenching? And is there a reason why we haven't explored those before with other service providers?
I would say the reason we haven't explored them before is they haven't been requested. We haven't fully vetted out both options. We've asked, and Asha can speak to this too, but we've asked Ziply to provide us with, cities where they've allowed microtrenching 5 to 10 years out on their roads and what the impact has been to the roads. And they're trying to find examples of that so that we can get a better understanding of impact on longevities on our road systems. The soft surface placement looks more promising, but we're not committed to that yet. We still need to do a little bit more evaluation on it.
And they're not in addition to these ways to install, they're not also asking us to reduce our fees, because that was an ask that they had last time they were here.
That's correct. That's not part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Randolph, and then Councilmember Best-Campbell.
I believe Councilmember Evans must have read my mind, because she brought up the two items I was going to bring up. But one thing, given this, if we were to consult that the city manager being able to move forward, we would be able to ask for those specific timelines and secure those penalties. The other thing that's of concern here is, I guess, making sure that when we do that trenching, is there a level of liability that if it did collapse within 5 years, that we avoid issues with that?
And I think that is the reason why this has not been approved yet. We want Public Works is definitely looking into examples of where these are giving references. They've only provided one reference in Washington. So these are not widely used. Let me put it this, these are not widely used installation methods. They are definitely, as they noted, they are cheaper methods for them, but the impact to the city, not only in terms of maintenance and also any future repairs that we have to do, it's also, some of them is also aesthetics, because micro trenching puts this longitudinal, if you can say, along the entire stretch of the road. And this is micro-trenching, don't want to get into detail, but micro-trenching they're proposing for areas where there is groups of 20 homes. So it's not just a stretch of one home. They're looking for groups of 20 homes so that it would potentially be for an entire residential street. So as Mr. Fritz mentioned, we are still evaluating. We have asked them for information. We have asked them for references. So this is definitely nothing more than just data gathering at this point.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So for 3 years, they've been in violation of their franchise agreement with us at the fine of $20,000 a year. And it's only when we're coming to the end of the contract that they want to renegotiate in such a way that the city ends up giving them more than they should be giving us. So they're asking for us to waive all these fees, and the fees that they're asking us to waive are in excess of what it would cost to provide that cable service. So that's, instead of $17,000, we're giving them $30,000 credit back for, I don't know why. I can't describe why. They have a very negative past history with us. They've blown us off for 3 years. They come back to us and say, gosh, our billion-dollar company can't make this pencil out unless you allow a very underutilized micro-trenching in your community. Maybe if we can make it work, but we can't commit to making it work. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them at this point. They haven't shown themselves to be worthy of any negotiations at this point. You know, for 31 customers, I understand it's going to be a burden, but it's not worth $30,000 and then another $30,000 and then a change to our building regulations to accommodate it. If they can't make it work here, that's a business decision. I think that changing our city based on their request when we haven't had an opportunity to investigate it thoroughly on our own to see if it's something that we would even want, I don't think that there's anything that we could tell the city manager other than go back to Zipley and say, yeah, no, thank you. You've shown us what you think of Woodinville, and this is what we think of you.
Since we're talking about authorizing the city manager to go back on this, I'd like to hear, my main concern is, of course, the customers, the citizens, the residents of Woodinville that we serve. So if we tell Zipley, no thanks, what is the impact on those 31, which I'm mostly concerned about, and some of the other underutilized, underserved areas, and what are the options and solutions? So, Mr. City Manager, do you have any input or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the nexus that we're talking about, one way to look at it is it incentivizing that installation to those underserved areas and continuing the service to the 31 customers with that kind of soft landing that they've proposed. I think the alternative, right, if we don't do something like that, I think, as the council members have discussed, it's purely a business decision. If it doesn't pencil, regardless of how big the business is, if it doesn't pencil, their decision, as any reasonable business, would be not to do it, which means that they will not extend service to those areas. That's a business decision. We can and council can deliberate leaving that to the market decisions. That's entirely within its purview. I think what we're looking at with these liquidated damages is whether or not we try to incentivize them to extend those services and whether that's a value for that lost liquidated damages to the city or not.
Okay, that clears it for me. I think these services are a utility that we should do our best to extend, and I would encourage us not to waive any damages or fees until we get performance on what they're promising or talking about. But I would be in support of the city manager and trying to negotiate something around that framework. Councilmember Arndt.
I had a conversation with some representatives from Zipley Fiber, and I have to say it left a pretty bad taste in my mouth afterwards, just the communications back and forth. So while I don't entirely trust them as a company, I do think it's worth negotiating for those 1,700 residents in the city who might have the opportunity to put a little competition to Comcast. Even if you think about competition reducing their bill by maybe $10 a month, that's tens of thousands of dollars of savings over a year for our residents. I would just proceed very cautiously with a lot of guarantees and things in writing at this point. I think that looking at the analysis from the point of view of the city, we would be sacrificing the $60,000 of damages, but potentially benefiting our citizens much more. But I would be very cautious.
Mr. Mayor, I would just, I don't want to establish false expectations. I've been the one doing most of the negotiations with this, and I think the most likely scenario in terms of build out would probably be the 1,100 customers that they likely will not be able to reach a 100% build out through this negotiation process. I just want to make sure that council understands that that's my best estimate of where we would get with this process.
So question follow up on that. could we still withhold in the negotiations the penalties until we get a reasonable amount of performance? I mean, that seems like a natural occurrence. I don't know what the practical numbers are, but I would not be in favor of waiving any of the fees and damages until we get a reasonable, whatever that number is, to a reasonable number of residents providing service. Yeah. And I'll also add that I don't know what there was described as the seals up. Like, I don't know, is that just throwing some dirt over it and just hoping that it doesn't resurface? Or I don't know what that means, but I would encourage us to make sure that they're doing that right. And we should have some clauses in there to maybe inspect it and make sure all of that is done properly in some fashion. So I wouldn't be in favor of waiving the fees until we get a certain performance. And I think that whatever their process is settled on, that we inspect it and it meets a reasonable standard is my thought. Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, I'm good with the negotiation, but I would leave the micro trenching and tearing up of our streets out of it. So, you know, the soft trench, that's proven technology for the farmers, and irrigation. Let's work with that, but I don't want our streets that we have paid a lot of time and effort in building to be torn up or to be compromised. And I've seen some patchwork with other utilities in the past that, you know, was something we couldn't live with after spending all that money. So everything but the micro trenching, I think that would be off the table.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So it was 3 years that they were allowed to accrue these assessments for not providing the level of service that they agreed to in the franchise agreement. Do we have something going forward where we're going to address that perhaps yearly as opposed to every 3 years? I don't want to get that far out of compliance with a franchise agreement.
When they took over the franchise, we engaged with them a conversation about the liquidated damages and the fact that their predecessors hadn't built out. They requested, and so we've had continual conversations with them over that 3-year period. They requested that we give them an opportunity to show them, give them an opportunity to show us that they can build out in our system. And each year we said, well, you haven't done it yet. And each year they came back and said, your permit fees are too high. It doesn't pencil out. Please consider making adjustments. We made one adjustment to help reduce fees. It didn't yield any significant build out. So when we reached year 2, at the end of year 2, and we were in year 3, and the final year of the contract is when I started talking to them about, okay, now you do understand it's going to be time to pony up. And so I just want to make it clear to council, the ball wasn't dropped. We didn't forget. We were in discussions with them. We were making good faith efforts to see if we could get them to build out. And when they didn't perform, we started conversations about paying the liquidated damages. And it's progressed to where we are at today.
Well, I guess that's what I'm moving forward. I think that staff did engage in good faith negotiations. They did not. So I think once bitten, twice shy in this situation. I think it's important that we're not nice anymore. I think that they've let us on enough, and what they're presenting to us sounds like more of the same, kicking the can. We promise we'll get to you. We'll see if we can pencil it out. If you can, great. If you can't, great. You know, there's nothing that Woodinville can do to change the economics. When we did the permit analysis, didn't we make sure that our permit fees are similar to other jurisdictions? So it pencils out everywhere else, yet somehow in Woodinville it doesn't. Their logic sort of escapes me. I don't appreciate their using this as an opportunity to extract more from us than they've ever given to us. So I think that they should have to pay liquidated damages. They negotiated in bad faith for 3 years, and what they're offering us is a lesser version of an installation, certainly not what Woodinville deserves, for the maybe possibility down the road if it pencils out, but we can't tell you until you give us all this money and all of this opportunity. So I absolutely not giving them a dime of the liquidated assets that they're asking for. And micro-trenching, you know, if staff hasn't seen the need to force, you know, to have us change that in the building code, I certainly don't think it should be a business-led decision. I think it should be something that we come upon as a council and decide, yes, this technology looks promising. So I'm at an impasse with them. I don't think that they're offering us anything. I think that everything is pie in the sky and pillow talk, and I just don't believe them because of the way that they've been dealing with staff.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Just a point of clarification, we're not paying Ziply Fiber $30,000 for anything. This is a question of whether we're going to waive for those 31 customers and whether or not we're participating in a process in which they can tell us whether or not that an additional $30,000 that is owed, right? Is that currently owed?
It's the city's position that $60,000 in total of liquidated damages is owed by Ziply to the city of Woodinville.
And the additional $30,000 is a question about expansion and whether or not they fit the needs that we've laid out here as a council.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm just making sure that I'm clear on what the request is. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
I move the city council authorize the city manager to enter into another settlement agreement with Ziply or continue to discuss the settlement agreement with Ziply substantially in the form presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Deputy Mayor Randolph.
One of the things that came up last time we discussed this is competition. Everybody believes it's fair to have competition, especially given that internet is no longer a leisure device. Even though we use it for lots of leisure, it is a necessity. It's a utility at this point. Councilmember Arndt pointed out a horrible experience with Ziply. I have also had a horrible experience with Xfinity. So when you are a utility where people have no choice but to use you, I think you just have a horrible attitude from time to time. So I do think what this council has directed is, A, let's make sure that we're doing the right thing with this shallow trenching thing. We need to make sure that that is not going to become a detriment around the city. Number two, let's put them on a timeline. We can't allow them to yank us along forever. And number three, tie the funds to them actually finishing the job.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So just to clarify, Mr. Buchanan, what is your understanding of how you're going to move forward to the negotiations? You know, we've all said a lot of things, but I want to hear distilled down what it is that you're thinking moving forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I hear the no microtrenching, the soft surfaces on the table. I think the interest is in expanding with some pretty rigid parameters around performance, and I think we've got pretty good at that. We've got lots of examples of that when we've worked on development agreements and whatnot. Making sure that we're ensuring performance before we're releasing any liquidated damages, but that if it comes down to it, well, we think we can, but we can't guarantee it, then my impression from council, and please tell me if I'm wrong, is you're out of luck then, and we'll be looking for the full liquidated damages.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councilmember Evans.
Just a point of clarification. We're still getting $30,000 in liquidated damages paid to us, correct?
Correct. We believe, based on the conversations today, that kind of soft landing for the 31 customers is likely off the table at this point. They haven't said that definitively, so that could still be a part of the conversation, but I think at this point we're more focused on the second if you will, the second $30,000 about expanding the service to that estimated 1,100 customers.
And if they do that soft landing, that's another 17,000, and they're sort of taking that off the table now. I think, I just feel like they're constantly moving, moving the ball and saying, hey, we need this. I think if they don't do that soft landing, we need that 17,000 back to us as well. And I think anything that is negotiated must have significant teeth with big penalties for not reaching those timelines that are immediately I do worry about these 31 customers. I don't want them to suddenly have everything ripped out from them and have to have their only choice be Comcast. So I do want to make sure that we're taking care of these folks and giving them an off-ramp if at all possible. But if Ziply says, we can't make that pencil either, I say we just go and really make sure that we're holding their feet to the fire. So, I mean, I'm for seeing if we can expand it. Like Deputy Mayor Randolph said, this is a utility. It's something everybody needs. I would like to have more options for our citizens other than just Comcast for much of the city. So if we can get them to do it, but I don't trust them. So I want to make sure that we're getting our money if they don't follow through on this agreement.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing is, the interest, the goal is to expand the service primarily. If that's not going to happen quickly and extensively, then we're going to be looking for the $60,000.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. Business item number 12, approve purchase of one 2023 Ford F-150 Lightning. Mr. Fritz or Buchanan?
One moment, and I'll pull up the presentation. Good evening again, Council. And it's a short 5-slide presentation for you this evening. A little bit of background. The city ordered a Ford Maverick hybrid to replace a 2004 Ford F-150. It's used by the engineers in Public Works to do inspections in the field and other work that takes them out onto our city streets. In June, the Maverick delivery was indefinitely delayed due to a recall issue, and the city opted to cancel the order. Here's a little bit of information on the recall. This is on their website as of today. So significant quantities of engine oil and fuel vapor may be released into the engine, causing a potential fire. And because it's a hybrid, the engine can continue to operate and still, the driver can still drive down the road even though the car is on fire, and which is awesome. The expected repair date is they don't know. So, the decision to cancel the order, I think, was the right one based on that. Mr. Buchanan did want to add flames to the picture. I took them out. But as an alternative, the city, and if you recall when we were discussing vehicles from the onset of this year, the market's pretty unique right now and demand is high. And so we're taking steps quickly when vehicles come on the market to make a purchase decision. But we can cancel orders without recourse if we have to. It takes roughly 6 to 9 months to get a vehicle delivered. So we took the steps to order a Ford F-150 Lightning 4x4. The total cost estimate for this vehicle, this includes aftermarket add-ons that we'd need to add to the vehicle, like the city decals, licensing, and so on, is $72,480. That's roughly $7,480 over the budget that we established for the purchase. It would replace the same Ford F-150 that we were proposing for the Maverick. This purchase is in alignment with the adopted climate action plan, which is the reason we're proposing an EV option. And while we were looking at long-term options for charging stations, the options were not readily available at affordable prices. We've evaluated it, and short-term charging solution would be to trickle charge the vehicle, which is totally doable, given the frequency of the vehicle's use, which is somewhere between 2 and 4 hours a day tops. The trickle charge should be sufficient to meet our needs. And so we're just asking council for approval to purchase the vehicle. If council doesn't provide the approval this evening, we'll cancel the order. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Taylor.
So last time we gave the approval to the city manager to make the best decision, and that was a gasoline-powered vehicle. It was the hybrid or the electric. So did we look at the gasoline-powered vehicle and the availability and the ability to meet delivery?
It was 43.
Hold up.
It was a $23,000 difference.
Okay.
47 total.
Okay, we have an estimate for the all gasoline one, and I think we're pulling it up. I think the difference was $23,000 difference.
I'm rounding to the nearest thousand, but 23.
So how much?
$23,000 difference. The gas-powered vehicle was roughly $47,000.
Within the budget?
Yes, it was within the budget. And that, just to be clear, the $47,000 number doesn't include the add-ons. That's roughly another $2,500. That's why the math may not be working in your head when I say $23,000 difference. So just the vehicle purchase alone for the EV vehicle is roughly $70,000. The gas vehicle was roughly $47,000.
So explain the service of the vehicle. Where do you see it fitting in the fleet? Is this going to be part of snow removal or part of our long-term work where we need to have it for 18 hours or?
No, this would replace the current vehicle that's used by primarily our engineering staff for field visits and field verification work. So that's where that 2 to 4 on average hours a day of use comes from. So it's not intended, and it wouldn't be used for public works crew and snowplow and all that kind of work.
And how long do you typically keep the vehicle? How many?
The one that it's replacing is coming up on 20 years old. It's a 2004.
Okay. So how long do the batteries last?
I don't have that in front of me right now.
Sounds.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Do you have an estimate on when we're going to get access to the real charging stations and not just trickle charge?
Part of what we looked at for the charging stations, we looked through a couple different options through the state contract, and based on some estimates on different locations around City Hall, it was outside of the budget that we had available in our current budget for charging stations. Part of what we're working on right now, and Mr. O'Neill's leading this effort, is coming up with a kind of a comprehensive rollout plan for electrification of our city fleet and facilities. That would look at different facilities and kind of come up with a plan and a schedule on when those different facilities, in whether it's a phase thing or all at once, what that would look like. And that, I think, will be part of a discussion, in line with the climate action plan that council's adopted. will probably be a discussion as we go into the CIP next year of, what does a larger, more comprehensive project look like, or does that need to look like in phases? Right now, because we have this, we didn't want to make something fit when we didn't need to, when we had this ability to do the trickle charge, and that works just fine for us for the time being.
Councilmember Evans.
Do we know what the difference in cost to maintain these vehicles will be? So if we were to take a look at the all-gas vehicle, there's oil changes, there's gas tanks or diesel or whatever it takes. There's all that routine maintenance. Is this electric vehicle kind of on par with some of the other electric vehicles that are out there that have virtually no maintenance costs other than charging?
We didn't do a cost analysis in that regard, but, in general, as you pointed out, EV vehicles are tending to require less maintenance costs throughout the life of the vehicle. The braking systems don't, the engine does a lot of the braking for the vehicle, so you don't have to use your brakes as much. You don't get as much wear and tear. You don't have lubrication issues on an engine system, so you have a lot less maintenance in regards to that. So we would expect the maintenance costs to be significantly lower for the EV vehicle at this point.
Yeah, especially if we're looking at $5 per gallon gas, and a truck can burn through that pretty quickly. The cost for the charging stations, I know it's not on the table right now, but was it because of the charging station itself, or was it because of the need to run power out to where we would have, okay.
Right, yeah, that's a great question. So the estimates that we were putting together, the project that we were kind of scoping out, was to forward compatible the electric conduit, which was a big expense running at that distance, and putting in enough to run up to 4 charging stations for 8 vehicles, and building it forward compatible. So we're putting in more conduit than we're going to need in the foreseeable future, so that as we continue electrification in the future, we have that capacity there and aren't digging up and putting a new trench all the time. That was a big piece of it. The other part of it was that our budget currently has, I think half of that budget that was provided, the $85,000 for charging stations, was grant. With the turnaround and time and the delivery time expected on this vehicle in October, we're just not going to be in a position to get that and put that to get the grant piece of that between now and then, and still get this project charger installed by then. It was basically, you would have to pull the trigger on the contract now, which obviously precludes us from having any ability to do the grant piece of it. So with all those factors considered, and having this trickle charging ability there, that works for now, and then we can have a more comprehensive conversation about what the rollout of the chargers actually looks like in the future, I think.
With an offset of grant. You read my mind, because that was my next question. And then remind me, our state is really moving to phase out gas vehicles within the next 10, 15 years?
2035.
So within the life of this vehicle as well?
Yeah, I think it was 2035, if I remember right, is the target on that.
Okay, so about 12. So it does make sense for us to look at moving to the electric vehicle, if at all possible, especially with these mitigating factors. And I really like the idea that we're already looking at grant opportunities for charging stations so that we have that in place moving forward. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Just a basic follow-on question to Councilmember Evans' thoughts about fueling. How do we currently fuel our vehicles for the city?
The city has an account with the Pacific Pride Station over by Costco, and so all the fueling's done over there. The beauty of that particular service is it allows for a lot of internal controls to make sure that there's no abuse of city funds in purchasing fuel. So we can track what each vehicle receives, who's making the purchase, and keep statistics on each vehicle to make sure that the fuel is being used appropriately.
But we have to have someone on city staff actually do a gas station run in order to refill the vehicle, and they spend an amount of time to actually go through that, especially at a line at Costco, right?
Well, that's the idea. Then when I get in the vehicle and it doesn't have any gas, I mean, somebody didn't go to the gas station and I get to. So yes, in general, that's your point is right. We have to take it up to the station to get it filled.
Okay, and this would avert that. We could now plug in when they return to the station where it's going to be stored. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. I think I was absent at the meeting where we approved the purchase of the hybrid, but just for clarification, the hybrid, which catches on fire, was initially approved because we couldn't get a fully electric vehicle at that point in time. So the intention at the beginning of the year was to purchase an electric vehicle, but we couldn't find any available, so we got an EV, which is not available.
In
so
February, we came to council and we said, look, the market's really strange. We need more flexibility. We know that the idea is to try to go electric, but we need some flexibility. And council said you can have that flexibility given the market conditions. And so we bought one gas-powered Maverick because it was available on the market. And then we bought one EV or hybrid Maverick because that was available on the market. And those were the only options at that time. And the reason why you don't recall approving the exact purchase of the hybrid is because they were well below the authorization threshold of us required to take it to council. They were, I think, $27,000 a piece, and the city manager has the authority up to $50,000. So you didn't miss any meeting.
Okay. Just a follow-up question. I know initially when we were looking at the beginning of the year at electric vehicles, do you remember what the cost of those vehicles was that we could not get?
There was, I think at the time, there was one Chevy option, and if I remember right, and I don't quote me on this, but I think it was north of $100,000 by the time it was done. I'd have to go back and look at that specific, but it was absurd. That's why we were looking for the flexibility on the other options.
So we're 7,480 over budget for the Ford Lightning. Would it be possible to, while we're waiting to figure out the grant process and the charging costs, would it be possible to take that $7,480 out of the EV pot and then switch it to this so that is that a thing, so that we're actually heading in the same direction and the same?
He's clicking away fiercely. I think it depends on how we funded that, what sources of revenue we funded that CIP project. If it was general fund, yeah, we can look that up.
Okay.
On any of these projects, moving between general fund and CIP funds, it just depends on the source of revenue that was going towards that CIP project.
I was looking at that Maverick, and it looked pretty small, at least from the picture. Is that correct?
It's on the smaller side, certainly, for a truck.
So does this Ford, does it accommodate the needs of staff better than that smaller vehicle?
I mean, it's a full-size truck, which comes in a consideration for some of the drivers. It's the 4x4 version of it, so that we've had that conversation in the past at City Council, the desire to have that ability there in case we need it in any event.
Okay. So this goes in line with not only our climate action plan, that one of the biggest mitigators that we can do as a city was always transportation. It was the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases, according to all our experts that we had. I'm in favor of actually starting the process of electrifying our fleet, meeting our not only our climate action goals, but also I believe this was in our strategic plan in order to start greener processes in some of the city business. So I'm in favor of purchasing this. I've owned, my wife's driven a EV since 2013, and Mr. Fritz is correct. It has the original brakes on it. There's been no oil changes. There's been wipers and tires, and it recently got a new computer chip in it that upgraded it to certain things. It wasn't necessary, but it was a nice feature. So the maintenance and operating costs are quite low. I get an annual report on how much I'm saving based on fuel prices. I did just a rough just napkin, and I think based on like 4,000 miles a year, which isn't a ton, the savings with maintenance and operations would be about $1,500 a year. And the batteries, according to JD Power, last from 12 to 20. Like I said, my wife's is 2013, and it's still growing strong and had very little degradation. I mean, it could go out tomorrow for all I know, but they don't know the upper limit of it. So JD Power says 12 to 20 years. If we got something like that with just 10 years, we would save a substantial amount of money on and have no emissions. So I'm in favor of starting the process. As far as the EV chargers, we have an opportunity to look at this a little bit differently. We have some opportunities obviously at Public Works, but we have opportunities here where during the day, if we electrify our fleet, the city staff could use them all day and travel around Woodinville, no emissions, less maintenance, no fuel, and then during the day, I would think we could and probably should have a discussion on whether we open that up to the public for public charging in our park system or at Wilmot, certainly, or not Wilmot, but at the ball fields here. So anyway, long story short, I'm in favor, and I would like to see us start this process.
I move that the City Council approve the purchase of the 2023 Ford F-150 Lightning Better EV for $72,480 and authorize the city manager to take actions necessary to implement the action.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Deputy Mayor Randolph.
I like this aligns with our climate action agreement. We went through a difficult time actually planning that out, and as the mayor pointed out, transportation was one of the huge pieces. But beyond that, I think this gives us an opportunity to see directly what our gas vehicle costs versus our electrical vehicle costs are. And I think we'll notice a huge difference in terms of utilization and our ability to use that vehicle, and it will speak greater to how we electrify in the future.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So I appreciate the move to electric vehicles, but my concern is more of a budgetary one. So we've had a lot of meetings recently where there's the throwaway sentence of, and we're going to need to make a mid-biennium adjustment to account for this change. So there's a significant amount of money over our budget. We're 8 months in at this point? We're making a lot of additional charges, and sure, we have money in the bank, but it's more than we'd budgeted for. Yes, we want to go to electric vehicles, but I also have to weigh it against the budget and the money that we've been entrusted to manage. So sure, let's get the truck. It's one truck. But moving forward, I really think that we need to be a lot more knowledgeable and paying attention, I guess, to the additional amount required in all of our staff reports. We've been going over a lot, and you know, some things we don't have a choice on, they have to happen, but something like this is a luxury because we have the money, and we should take that seriously, and we should try to minimize the amount of times that we have to keep going back and adjusting mid-biennium because we need more money. Either we budget more to begin with, or we don't do the project. So this is fine, this is one car, but I think that this is a cautionary tale moving forward for our budgetary process.
Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Rubstello?
Yes.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Millman?
Yes.
Councilmember Arndt?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
No.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you. Next public comment period. Do we have anybody signed up? Sharon Peterson. Reminder, just state your name for the record and whether you live in Woodinville, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Somebody turn me on? There we go. Okay, my name is Sharon Peterson. I live in the city of Woodinville. I am proudly sporting items from Gift Horse this evening. So I just want to show off the participation in the local businesses. That's because I just came from the barn. I have 4 things to talk to you about tonight. So the other day, on Saturday, I was supporting my local businesses getting my nails done, and I said to myself, let's see if I can walk from Wellington to downtown Woodinville using only trails. Turns out the answer is no, because Wood Trails is still, there's like 4 signs out there, but there still isn't a path that goes down the hill and turns left, where it could then connect to Greenbrier, where I could potentially walk most of the way from Wellington to downtown Woodinville using only trails. So we've talked about Wood Trails. We even had a celebration for the opening of Wood Trails, and I was told, but we can't start any work because we don't have any park impact fees. Well, now we do. So now I actually want to start work. That means trucks and shovels and trails and, work. We're done studying. We've done the park studies. We've done all the studying. We've even mapped out trails. There isn't any more research that needs to be done. We just actually need to get moving. So that is actually item 1 and 2. I want to know when we're going to start moving. I was told, no, we have to wait till summer. It's summer. In fact, it's so far into summer that everybody's doing back to school now. So could we please get started? Next item, NERTS. They will be producing, I believe, a report for review this fall. I haven't heard any discussion about how this council is going to go attack that legally. I have every expectation that you should. It's been made clear to you that it is illegal for that site to be placed where it is because it's adjacent to a school, and that is violating a very important law. So obviously, King County is going to ignore that or defer it until somebody throws a lawyer at them and makes them pay attention. I expect this council to do that, and I expect you to plan very proactively to do that. And I want to hear about it. Next step, modernizing the infrastructure. So last week, I called into the Planning Commission meeting. I was on the phone for an hour when very abruptly the phone call dropped. Now, at this point, I'm rather pissed off because I waited for an hour so that I could actually speak, and the call drops. So why can't we modernize our ability for people to plug into council meetings or in planning commission meetings on Teams? When I go to the website, it says you can call in to a council meeting, but I see humans up here on the screen that are obviously joining a Teams call, but you can't do that for planning commission. So we're not helping people who have disabilities. We're not making it easy for them to interact with the city. And that's important. And that's disrespectful that we don't do that. Let's get to work and get modernized, please.
Thank you. Report to city manager.
Wait a minute, there's other people who want to speak.
I'm sorry, I only had you signed up.
Forgot to sign up.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
State your name and whether you live in the city limits, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name's K.Y. Sue. I live 5 blocks outside of city limits in Kingsgate. So, quick diversion. There's in the GP rezone, there's a reference to Little Bear Creek being a shoreline of statewide significance. That's incorrect. It's a shoreline of the state, but not statewide significance. That'll make a lot of difference to applicable regulations. Mainly, and yeah, I appreciated hearing about GIS today. So yeah, mainly I wanted to talk about, am I out of order if I address the rainbow crosswalk? Okay, thank you. I just lost my, okay, I want to segue from what Ms. Peterson said about disrespecting the disabled. It was pointed out to me by a friend who's an architect and firefighter that these pride crosswalks may not be ADA compliant because seeing eye dogs don't recognize them, and people with visual impairments have a harder time seeing them. My wife has Parkinson's, and that's why I have the Walk for Parkinson's shirt on. A lot of Parkinson's people have trouble walking, and visual stimulation can be a big part of causing their feet to freeze. So I would urge, in the name of inclusion, that the disabled be considered when designing or implementing these types of crosswalks. I would like to see a disability pride or Parkinson's pride crosswalk as well as this LGBT one. If you're not going to do that, I would say at least don't make it hard, don't make life more difficult for the Parkinson's and disabled community. And again, I want to see that there's equity in the process. You could get any number of requests for, Purple Heart Pride, persecuted religions pride. Do you have a process to sort through all those types of applications or requests with equity? I like to see that. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Port City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Given that it's 10:30 and we still have an executive session this evening, I'm sorry if you forgot about that. I'll pass on that right now. Thank you.
Reports of council members. Councilmember Evans.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Councilmember Rubstello.
Nothing, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Nothing, thanks.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Nothing.
Councilmember Arndt.
Sorry, I got to break the streak. I just wanted to provide a brief report from the Trestle Subcommittee, which met on July 26th. I think the city manager did a fantastic job summarizing the meeting and its results in his last report, so I won't go into too much detail, but it was a very short meeting. We looked at the option presented by the designers. We thought it looked pretty good, and we discussed a plan for gathering some more public feedback. It's been out at table events at Celebrate Woodinville, and we have an online poll circulating throughout the community, and all of that information will come back to the council, I think, sometime in September is the plan. And just one other thing in reference to tonight's public comments. The Public Spaces Commission has had discussions in the past about about potentially implementing a process to add crosswalk art to the city. And I think that this discussion that we've heard tonight and the people that are coming forward is an opportunity to potentially reinvigorate that discussion at the Public Spaces Commission about what it would look like across the city to have public art installations at our crosswalks. We could address the process issue, address other community groups who maybe want to see representation in the city. And I know that it is also typically seen as a safety measure to have these art installations at crosswalks. It increases pedestrian safety as well. So just a suggestion there.
Thank you. Councilmember Taylor.
Nothing tonight.
Just real quickly, I wanted to, I was remiss in not thanking Councilmember Rubstello earlier for his service, and we're allowed to fill his shoes. I wanted to do a little more feedback on the community outreach. It's been actually, I spend a lot of time hearing about, and it's more than appropriate, but I hear people that have issues and like to see the city do things. And it was actually a lot of fun hearing the excitement of people looking at a new bridge and the opportunity to expand the lanes and connect to the East Rail Corridor and possibility of creating a new park and all the opportunities that come along with that. So it was very well received. We have a break until I think September 17th, 19th? 19th is our next meeting. So enjoy your summer recess. And we're going to be going into lost the verbiage, there it is. We're going to be going into an executive session.
On that one, I'd suggest it. In your agendas, it's 30 minutes. I think we could probably start with 15, and if we need to add more time, we can do that.
Okay. Executive session. Council will adjourn to closed session for approximately 30 minutes to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, or to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation to which the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in an official capacity is or is likely to become a party when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in adverse legal or financial consequences to the agency, appropriate RCW. No formal action is expected to be taken. Let's take 20 minutes so that I can go to the restroom.